Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Wednesday. You guys know what that means. It's time for another Notre Dame football midweek rundown. We have an absolutely loaded slate today. We're kicking off today's
Gonna
show.
be a banger.
Oh, it sure is, man. It absolutely is. We're starting off today's show. Brian, you went to the Marcus Freeman sit down yesterday. So we're going to kick off today's show just kind of highlighting some of the things that he talked about. Injury update, CJ Carr, the tight end room, the new defensive coaching staff. Lots to take away from what Marcus Freeman talked about yesterday. In part two of today's show, we're diving into an article that ESPN wrote about some of the top teams in college football and like their biggest ifs. And
it was really good.
It was.
This is not going to be like a let's rip ESPN for the latest stupid article they wrote. I thought it was really good. It was a great idea. And so we're going to talk about it and then also give ours. That was really well done.
There was no section and there was no team where I was like, that's the if.
Like seriously, this is the dumbest thing. Like, has this guy even watched any of these teams?
Right. No, it was well done. It was thought out. We're diving into that in part two of today's show. Part three, we're sticking with the opponent preview series, talking about Notre Dame's eighth opponent of the regular season this afternoon, Navy midshipmen, their longest standing rival. That'll be a fun conversation. And then, Brian, we're wrapping everything up, ranking the top 10 defensive lines in college football, which should also be a fascinating discussion, man.
There will be some disagreement, I have a feeling, depending on which people are in the chat that follow other teams. If our guy Daly or Albert McKinney or Archer are in the chat, maybe Insured by Big might have some disagreements on these rankings, but I'll have some thoughts on just a lot of that when we get into it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
It is. Well, I love doing national rankings and diving into it. It helps give us a window into how other teams are looking because obviously we spend so much time diving into Notre Dame. And, Brian, I don't know how the weather is up on you guys, but it is 70 degrees down here today. Beautiful and sunny. Yeah. And I walked out this morning. We were going to an OB appointment, and I walked out this morning. I was like, dude, it feels like fall outside. It was like 63 degrees this morning. I was like, this is such a tease. I need the season here. But, I mean, thankfully it's closer than what you think. But, when we start talking about the Notre Dame football midweek rundown, where we're going to start today, guys, is the sit down that you were at yesterday with Marcus Freeman, where he covered a host of different topics. And one of the frequently asked questions was about injuries. That's been top of mind. We've been getting them in Friday free-for-all mailbags and buy-sell holds, and he shed some light on that topic as well.
Yeah, so just so people have some clarity on like kind of how this whole process works. So what they do is they break the people into two groups. First group was like Sean Stiers was in there. You had like Mike Berardino and Tom Noy from the South Bend Tribune. And then it was Sean Stiers, the South Bend Tribune people, and then the people from Irish Illustrated. Then our session was me, Matt Freeman from ISD, Matt Fortuna, and then the BGI people. And so we get 45 minutes to ask, however many questions we can kind of get and go in order. And so people have different questions and different focuses. And so the injury stuff we'll get on, but as as Katie let us know yesterday, like, guys, this is a very incomplete thing. We'll have a lot more to say about things on August 4th. So we're not going to spend too much time on the injury thing, but I did think there were some things that were worth discussing. And really the biggest one, Trev, is the news on Charles Jagsaw. And I wrote an article about it last night. And, Coach Freeman spent some time talking about Charles Jagsaw with us and with the first group, because obviously that was a great question to ask. I can't remember who asked it in our group, but Sean asked it in the first group. And essentially what Coach Freeman said is like, guys, he's still a work in progress. And he talked about the difficulty of nerves. He's got to get his strength back. There's a lot to it. And he said he won't be cleared to start fall camp. He gave no timeline on when we're going to see Charles Jagsaw and made clear and said, like, when he talked about seeing him this year, it was this is what we're hoping for, not like he said, I'll bet that we'll see him this year, but he wasn't like, we will see him at some point in time this year. Like with Kingston, it was, I don't know if he's going to be ready for the start of fall camp, but he'll be ready soon. With Charles, there was uncertainty. So you can tell this is still very much a work in progress as far as, where he is in his recovery and still very much a question mark on whether or not he's ever going to truly get back to being the player he was before the injury. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, unfortunate. It's a good word for it. I mean, you hope for the best for the young man. And unfortunately, the news isn't that surprising. It's something that we've talked about throughout the course of the offseason. At this point, you just want him to get back healthy as a person. When you start getting into the conversation of nerve damage and functionality within your arm, it's, the thought process with Charles Jagsaw isn't how quickly can he become an All-American right guard. It's, when is he going to be able to start getting back to using his arm full strength again? And that's top priority for sure.
Well, and I'm hoping that from this press conference, that conversation can now be put to the side for a while. And like we even talked about it, Trev. We had a conversation last night. Like we had a section on Charles Jagsaw in the magazine that we're hoping is going to be ready to go next week. That's our plan. But we're like, we got to change this. Like we weren't super optimistic he was going to play anyway, but after the conversation yesterday, like we got to change this little segment right here. And so he did. So like it's unfortunate. And honestly, at this point in time, when we talk about Charles Jagsaw, the conversation it needs to be this from moving forward. It's not about, okay, is he going to be, when's he going to come back? When's he going to step into the starting lineup? 2026 needs to be a year where Charles Jagsaw just gets a chance to show that he can still play football, that he gets a chance to get physically healthy, get his technique back, get his strength back, and all those type of things. And if at some point in time this season he can be a 2-deep player, great. That's a victory for him and for the football team. Now it's about let's focus on getting him healthy for 2027. And that's an unfortunate thing, but that needs to be the expectation. And if for some reason he is able to play this year, then that's a bonus. That's added, for those who like gravy, that's a little gravy on your Thanksgiving plate right there. You know what I mean? Like that's what that is. So I think now when we talk about the offensive line for the foreseeable future, we'll talk about it with the guys that we know are going to be out there. And unfortunately, Charles won't be out there for a while.
Unfortunately not. I'm with you completely. Just have to hope that he's able to get back to health and see what the rest of his journey is going to be. Freeman also went on to talk about, he's been on not just an injury journey, but he's also battled some some things he feels for the young man, hopefully to see him back. But Jags wasn't the only guy that we got injury updates on, but to your point, it was August 4th is going to shed a lot more light on the topic.
Sure. Just some quick things. Again, we'll get into some more of this. I won't give like the full rundown, but we'll get into more of this as we get to August 4th. But he did say, here's a direct quote on Kingston Viliama-Asa. He says he won't be full. He'll be returned to play. I don't know exactly when he'll be cleared to play in a game, but he'll be practicing. When is he 100% full go? That's not going to be the start of fall camp. So not surprising. And Trevor, you and I talked about this yesterday. I hope that they are very patient. Take the slow road with Kingston. Here's the reality. He is a phenomenal talent. He's an All-American caliber player. He's a potential future first-round draft pick. All the things people say about Kingston are true. So what I'm about to say has nothing to do with Kingston Viliama-Asa. The reality is this, however, Trevor. If you can't start the season 6-0 without him against the teams that you're playing, you have bigger problems than Kingston Viliama-Asa not being healthy. Now, I'm not saying sit him out the first 6 games until BYU. What I'm saying is there is no need to rush him to get back because of how talented you are at the position. You have the deepest linebacker room in all of college football. Use that to protect Kingston. Because even if he doesn't come back till the 5th game and he plays 8 regular season games, there's still a great chance he's going to play 11 to 12 games this year. That's assuming he misses the first 4. I'm not even saying that he's going to miss the first 4, but you don't necessarily need him. And so take your time, be patient with him. Don't rush him back. And because you're going to need him from October 18th on. That's when you're going to need Kingston to win. Now, it is going to be hard to go 12-0 without Kingston, and it's going to be harder to win the championship without Kingston. But when you consider he's missed games each of his first 2 years, he had a torn ACL in high school, there is no reason to rush him back. Take your time, let him get fully healthy, let him get that strength back. When they say he's cleared now, wait another week. That's kind of how I feel about it. And get him back and then give him a couple games to kind of get his sea legs underneath him, and then hopefully he's ready to be full go, like full go, full reps, all that by – I think an ideal is like Stanford. I think that's kind of my ideal scenario, Trev, is the Stanford game, because then he has one full game, or maybe he plays a little bit against Purdue, plays a little bit against North Carolina, then he's full go against Stanford. That way, you're slowly working him back, and he's getting back into rhythm for the BYU game. That would be my ideal. And then here's the other thing. I don't know that I'm playing him much against Navy the week after. don't know that I'm going to do much of that. So we'll see kind of how it goes. But that's my take on Kingston, combined with what Coach Freeman said. Just a couple other little hot takes, or not quick takes, on the injury situation. Another interesting one is he said Quincy Porter still isn't 100%, and he doesn't know if he'll be 100% start fall camp. That's something to keep an eye on. He didn't elaborate. I don't want to elaborate. We'll talk. I'm sure he'll have a further update on August 4th. That's 2 weeks away, so I think we all need to be a little patient there. And he didn't look comfortable answering that question, and that's when I think Katie jumped in and was like, hey, guys, we'll know more on August 4th, because it is too soon to be going in on some of this. But he did say that Christopher Burgess definitely will not start the season. He had, I believe, a knee injury to start this summer. So that's why when we kind of did some of our D-line articles or D-line breakdowns, we didn't talk about Chris Burgess, because we knew this was out there. But, as you guys know our stance, we don't release injury information until we get clearance from Notre Dame, and we didn't get that from them. So now that's out there. We won't see Chris Burgess in fall camp, and probably not for the first few games of the season. He did say that Joey O'Brien should be good. He said Kari Adams should be good. He said Braden Robinson, Nick Reddish, and Tiki Hola all should be good. So that was good to hear, especially the Joey O'Brien part and Kari Adams part, especially.
Yeah, that's big news. I'm very much looking forward to getting more of a deeper dive update from Rob Hunt on August 4th. So definitely provides a little bit more clarification there as well, but definitely good step in the right direction. Have a little bit more clarity on what's going on with some of those injuries.
Yep.
In yesterday's meeting that you guys had with him, you also talked a lot about CJ Carr. He was brought up in both of the sessions, and the first one with Sean and in the second one that you were sitting in. And it just goes to echo the point that Marcus Freeman is very, very high on CJ Carr this upcoming season. And one of my favorite quotes that he had yesterday was when he was talking about it. He was like, hey, look, this is the type of preparation and the level of preparation, how dedicated he is to winning and how competitive he is. Let's say he was playing pickleball and he lost a pickleball game, and he knew he had one in 2 more days. He would spend 24 straight hours getting better at pickleball. And that's just the difference between CJ Carr and some of the other people. I mean, Freeman went on to say that it was a trait that he wished he had to a certain degree. He said he's a very unique player, and obviously the expectations for him this season are at a sky high, but he said that nobody can put bigger expectations on CJ Carr than CJ Carr. Yeah. And I mean, it's when you hear those things about the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, it gives you confidence in all the things that we're talking about this offseason about, is he able to handle the pressure? I think last week we talked about, with CJ, is he going to be able to handle the pressure of the moment, being able to shoulder the load of the offense, and all of the things that we're hearing is a very positive sign.
Well, I got a chuckle. There was one part where he talked about how, sometimes if Coach Freeman's like, you're arguing with someone or debating with someone, and you get to the point where it's like, hey man, we just have to agree to disagree. And he talked about how CJ's like, no, I'm going to stay on this one until basically I've won. If I believe it, I'm going to stay until I won. And I started kind of chuckling. I'm thinking that must be a quarterback thing, because that sounds a lot like me. If I think I'm right, I'm not going to let it go until you admit that I'm right. And it does speak to CJ's competitiveness, and we've seen that. And there was a comment in the Bisol hold that talked about how he's tightly wound, and I think that people confuse an ultra competitive person for someone who's tightly wound. I don't think CJ Carr is tightly wound at all. But as he mentioned, and he said, he also he talked about how he uses that in his preparation. Like as he prepares, that competitiveness, that desire to be great, that desire to one up the opponent is part of what he does in preparation going into games. And he talked a lot about how, he's obviously a very intelligent quarterback, and you can just tell that Marcus Freeman thinks very highly of CJ Carr, and just talked about the time around him and being on the road. And I love this comment from him. He said he's starting to be a chameleon, and he can turn it on when he's in front of the camera and say the right things, and then off the camera he's a competitor. It must be him. It might be him and Leonard talking about the last who won the offensive and defensive workouts. He's a competitive person, everything he does, but he's learning to be able to be that person when cameras and people he doesn't know are around. And then when the cameras are there, he's able to be the representation of the quarterback at Notre Dame in the right way. He's a great kid. He's a great young man. Everybody respects him. They like him, but he doesn't care. He was surrounded by 3 defensive dudes. They kept saying 4, you're a defensive guy too, but he doesn't care. He's a competitor. When he's arguing with somebody, and that's the thing I told you about. This is one he said. He goes, it's one thing to be competitive when it's a one-on-one situation. I go in against opponent. It's another thing to use that to prepare for the next opportunity that's coming. He knows there's an opportunity coming as a football player or in practice. He uses that competitive spirit to prepare, to make him better and more prepared for that opportunity. And I thought that was a really important quote to make when people think about, okay, yeah, he's competitive, but how does that help you be a better football player? How does it help you win? And I thought that quote summarized that better than any of the others.
Yeah, I agree completely. My level of confidence in CJ Carr isn't just because FanDuel has him as the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. It's hearing the things from his teammates and hearing the things from Marcus Freeman, his head coach, and seeing how he carries himself on media day and, on Get Up ESPN and on Sports Center. And it gives you a lot of confidence, man. I'm with you completely.
Well, and like the thing too is there was what's Tony's last name? Is it Simolini?
Oh, Simeone.
Sorry. Tony's my guy. I love Tony, but I always get his last name wrong. But there was that thing where he was on with Jordan Faison and Isaiah Dunn. And you just see them interact. I think that stuff is great for fans because you got to see them as just three kids.
Just dudes.
Just hanging around each other, talking. I mean, this is the stuff they talk about in the dorms or in the, in the hangout area at the Goog and different places. Like, that's the competitiveness you talk about. Like when one of them was like, what were they talking about? Like golf or something like that. And somebody, or pickleball. And somebody was saying that he was better than CJ. And CJ's like, what?
Ping pong.
Ping pong. That's what it was. Ping pong. And you see that. And, I think those are things that people can misconstrue what that is. And honestly, it can be a bad thing if you don't harness it. And I think that's why that last quote from Marcus Freeman was so important, because it's like, it's one thing to be competitive. It's another thing to be able to take that competitiveness and put it into a healthy manifestation of your ability and your talent. And I think CJ's learning to do that. And a perfect example is he has the worst game of his career last year against USC. And what does he do the next 2 weeks? He completes like almost 80% of his passes over the next two games against Boston College and against Navy. And it's just like just how locked in he was as a passer in those games. Now the offense as a whole wasn't great in those games, but I remember coming out in the BC game. Remember, Trev, that first drive, he made two absolute dart throws on that first drive to convert third downs. And the drive ended up stalling, but like you could tell he felt he had something to prove in that game. Comes out, goes 18 to 25, 299 yards, 72% completion rate, 12.0 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, no picks, a 198.86 quarterback rating in that game. The next week against Navy, he goes 13 of 16, 218 yards, 13.6 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns, 81.3 completion percentage, 257.58 quarterback rating. That came after the worst game of his career. And I just think that speaks volumes to the kind of player that the kind of competitor that CJ Carr is. And you hear Marcus Freeman basically making that very clear in how he explained it, talked about CJ yesterday. And I thought for anyone that does wonder if, how he handles it, I hope that question got put to rest a little bit with what we've seen on film, but then also with what Coach Freeman said.
Let's switch gears a little bit, talk about the Notre Dame tight ends, a topic that I'm never shy about talking about. And
that's why I'm the one that asked him the question. I was like, I can't look Trevor in the face ever again if I don't get a tight end question.
I wasn't able to make it, and Brian was like, hey, I asked a really good question about the tight ends. I was like, dude, it's like I was there.
Yeah, no, Trevor was like, yeah, we'll see. Let me listen to the transcript. We'll see if that was a good question.
I was like, let me transcribe it. And Brian was like, I'll handle it. It's all good, bro. No, but let's talk about the tight ends. One of the most anticipated summer arrivals that Notre Dame had between transfers and the 2026 freshman class is Ian Premer. And that was the first player that Marcus Freeman talked about when you asked a question about the tight ends. You're like, hey, give me your thoughts on the room as a whole. You now have, eyes on Ian Premer and him going through your program. And the first thing that he said was, quote, he looks like he's ready. Right now, I haven't gotten to see him with pads on. I haven't seen him put on a jersey, but he's smart. He's ready. He's got to continue to grow into his body that he has to be able to function with it. But it'd be interesting to see him in fall camp. But I like what I've seen so far. Very high on Ian Premer through summer workouts.
So there's certain things that text can't tell you. And that quote was positive. But the whole time Marcus Freeman's leaning forward and he's talking quietly and he's just giving you the answers. And look, I always enjoy hearing from Coach Freeman, but like a lot of his answers are kind of like, the questions are answers and, and his answers and things like that. And it's just kind of like, I'm trying to think of what to say. They're fine. They're good front page story type of things to talk about, right? That's what they are. But if you've been around him enough, and I believe that I have, there's things that he does where you can like, oh, this is the one that kind of got him. One was when he was asked about Brian Kelly, and I'll just leave it at that. There were pauses in the audio. I'll just leave it at that. The other one was when so he was leaning forward and he's looking at me. So like I'm to his left and I'm down at the end of the table and I'm looking at him. He's looking at me. And so I asked him this question about tight ends and I bring up Ian Premer's name and he leans back and he's like, he gets this big smile on his face. So as he's talking about the quotes that Trevor just made, his entire countenance changed when we talk about Ian Premer. And that's when you kind of know that Marcus Freeman is like, he's about to get into something that he's fired up about. It was like that when you asked him about CJ Carr. It's like that when you ask him about certain things. And that when I brought up the tight ends and he started talking about Ian Premer, that was it. But he also kind of had a similar reaction to Cooper Flanagan. And you can tell that Cooper had a very strong offseason and there is in the way that Marcus Freeman talked yesterday, there's a starting tight end and then who is coming after that. That's the conversation. And then he said, look, getting Cooper back was big. And he talked about what he brings in the run game and did mention like, there's something to the pass game he brings too, but he's going to have to prove that. But the run game stuff, you could tell like, okay, he's going to be a force. And then he said, look, he mentioned in order, James Flanagan, Ty Washington, and Jack Larson. He's like, somebody's got to emerge. Somebody's got to step up. So he did mention, because my question was more about like the talent in the room is unproven, but there's talent. And then I asked him about that in Ian Premer, and he's like, look, like you said, there's talent in the room, but they've got to now go out and somebody's got to emerge and kind of force the run of the field. He's like, we're not going to be playing 13 personnel. And he kind of smirked about that. And he goes, maybe in goal line. I was like, I hope in goal line, but I don't want to see Jordan Faison blocking the C gap this year, like we saw him and Will Pauling doing last year. But you could tell he got a little fired up about Coop, and he got real fired up about Ian Premer too, and that was and he mentioned James Flanagan twice as well. So those were the three where you could just tell his reaction was like a little bit different. But it was also very clear. He's like, those guys aren't there. Coop's ready to go. We can go to battle with Cooper Flanagan right now. And you could I'm reading him. This is my read of Coach Freeman. This isn't what he said. It's my read, just so people are clear. That between James Flanagan and Ian Premer, that he's really hoping that those two guys kind of step up. Because like they know what they got in Ty Washington. This isn't meant to be like, oh, Ty's not going to do anything. He is what he is. I think we need those two guys to really step up to really make this thing whole. And that was very apparent from my read of not just what he said, but just kind of watching his body language as he's talking about those things. I've been doing this a long time. I think I can spot the difference between, and I've been to a million coaches clinics and, and conventions and all that. You get a sense of when a coach is giving you something real and when he's just like, okay, here's the answer that'll be good for your stories. And, I'm giving you stuff, but I'm not really giving you anything. And, those are things that you can kind of tell the difference with Coach Free. And the tight end one was one where you could tell he was a little bit, and it's not about my question. It's about the group. Like the group brought that reaction out of him. So that was really good to see.
He also had a similar reaction, kind of upping the tone a little bit when he was talking about the new defensive assistants.
He's super fired up about that. I mean, yeah. Charlie Partridge is another one, and Aaron Henry's one where you could just like when he, I'm trying, who was it? I think it was Tyler James. I think it might have been Matt Freeman or Tyler James. I forget which one it was. They were both kind of to my right, closer to him, but one of them asked about Coach Partridge, and he gets just like, you guys know, you see Freeman smirk, the Freeman smirk, like, I got something for you, right? Like that's the look he had on his face when he started talking about Charlie Partridge. And it was like, and the one thing he talked about was like, look, you got to understand, like these older guys had been with with Al Washington for 3 years and did a great job. And there was a great relationship. He said, the most important thing was the buy-in. like, would the play? He goes like, I mean, we know that Coach Partridge is with the reputation he has, but would the buy-in be there? And that was something that I think you could tell was important, and to get them to kind of immediately buy in was crucial. And then he talks about, go ahead, Trev.
The biggest thing that I appreciated about when he was talking about both of them, and apologies for cutting you off because it sounds like you were getting ready to read the quote, but
I mean, I can't ever criticize someone for cutting another person off during a podcast. You'll never have me criticize you for that. Wait till after the show. How dare you cut me off? I'm the only person allowed to cut people off.
But one of the things that I really, really appreciated about what Freeman said about both Partridge and Aaron Henry was they took the time, and it was intentional time, to gain the trust of the players in that room. I mean, think about the rooms that we're talking about here. Rooms that have Jason Onye, Boubacar Traore, Bryce Young, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, Bryante Johnson, all spent the majority, if not all, of their college careers with Al Washington and Mike Mickens.
Mm-hmm.
And Freeman was very intentional to talk about how, like, hey, to start this thing off, they gained the trust of everybody in that room. They didn't just come in and say, this is how we're doing things now. Never mind the guy that was here previous. And I think that stems a little bit from the top down. And like, I'm not trying to look for areas to give like Chris Ash credit, but with him being the leader of the defense, one of the things that I appreciate is he talked about last year is like, I just didn't do a good enough job of getting to know my players well enough, led to some of the defensive struggles. And seeing his staff embody that, I'm looking pretty deep here in the weeds, but it gives me a good sign that the defense is continuing to head in the right direction. And when I heard Freeman say those things about Charlie Partridge and Aaron Henry, that made me feel real good.
Yeah. He did talk a lot about he called him a technician, talking about Charlie Partridge. He's a technician. And that's obviously a big thing. They wanted to kind of take things to another level. And, and he talked, like you said, it's what he said. He goes, gaining the trust of guys that had a really close relationship with an unbelievable coach in Coach Mickens. And he talked about, having the players over his house a lot, and Aaron Henry's a father with young kids. And sometimes that can be a challenge. Like, I got young kids and I'm just all of a sudden these grown boys that they've never met are coming over the house like that, but he's like, hey man, welcome to the house. And that's how Mike Mickens was with his wife and his young daughter. They were always over the house. He wanted them to know, like, hey man, you guys have a family here too. And from what I've heard about Aaron Henry, he's the same way. And I think one thing that this isn't from Coach Freeman, but this is something I've gathered from the sources I've talked to. One thing that Aaron Henry did that was really wise is he did not come in at all trying to undermine or push back on the Mickens influence. Like, hey, I know this guy did this, but we're going to do this. And there wasn't any talking. It was embracing what they had learned. It was letting him, hey guys, you had a great coach, and now it's my job to kind of, take it to the next level. And by the way, it was clarified to us yesterday. It is Bryante is what they told us he wants to be known as, Bryante. So it's not Bronte, as I've been saying. It's not Tay. It's not Tay. It's Bryante is what he wants to be called now. But that was something that was big, because if you don't get trust, if a new coach comes in, no matter what his reputation, if the players don't trust him, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And that's something that I've heard. And it's one thing for Freeman to say it. Of course he's going to say that. What's he going to say? Players don't like these guys.
Right.
But I'm hearing that from inside the locker room as well, talking to parents who maybe in the past didn't necessarily have the greatest things to say about certain people. And they're like, oh yeah, the players love them, coach, we love them. Like, talking to people in the linebacker room about Brian Jean-Marie. Now, he didn't get asked about yesterday in our session, but like, I'm hearing the same thing there. The veterans embrace him. They're excited to work with him, because he came in right away and was like, hey, like, you guys did a great job. My job is to try to take it to the next level. Here's my plan on how to do that. And it wasn't like, you suck here, you suck here, you suck here. It's like, hey, you do these things really great, but here's the areas where I want to get you better. And immediately getting in the film room with him and just showing that respect and that love to him. And I think that's something that's really helped. All three of those assistant coaches were real intentional about, hey, you can know all the football in the world, but if you can't get those players to buy in to who you are and your care for them, because you're the new guy here. You're the outsider, and that's something that, from what I've been told and what Marcus Freeman said yesterday, and you could just read his body language, those 3 hires were big time. And he did say something interesting that I want to find this. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see here. I thought he had said something. Oh, here it is. He goes, it was asked about, him coming in, and he was a defensive coordinator, and Freeman said, this is what he said. He goes, the minute he walks into a room, he brings energy. The energy changes. He's a guy who can walk in a room and just raise the energy. He's an energy provider. It's infectious. He said that about Charlie Partridge as well. That's the first thing that pops off. He's an extremely intelligent coach, obviously being a defensive coordinator at Illinois for so long, for a couple of years. He goes, the ability for him and Chris Ash to be on the same accord, know each other, it was such a no-brainer when he had mentioned he was interested in this opportunity, which I thought was really interesting. So it sounds like, and again, I'm reading into this a little bit, but it sounds like Aaron Henry wanted this job, not just, hey, I'm good where I'm at. Freeman came calling. It's an opportunity I can't pass up. It looks like being at Notre Dame is something he wanted to do. And if that's true, and if I'm reading that correctly, that explains a lot about why Aaron Henry's come in with the attitude he's come in with. Because I think he understood the task at hand, and he understood the kind of young man he was going to be coaching and the opportunity in front of him. And I think that makes I think that can change your mindset. Like, hey, you came after me, it's more of like, hey, I want that job. I want to be there. And if I'm understanding him correctly, that is kind of explains a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. He has an appreciation for the position that he holds. And I'm with you. That explains quite a bit. One of the final things that we'll talk about here, we'll talk more about Freeman's comments tomorrow in different segments. But the last thing that we'll talk about today that he discussed was he doubled down on his future at Notre Dame. Obviously there was a lot that came out about what he said on the Cam Hayward podcast, talk about how he wants to retire at Notre Dame. So we got asked about it. And he said, yeah, I don't want to come off as that to be an arrogant answer. I plan on being here as long as I can. If we do a good enough job and I'm able to, and wanted to be the head coach here, I want to stay the head coach here. I'm all in, and I've been all in. And there were times where I wanted to listen to some other people, and I did. And it confirmed that this is the place I want to be. I don't see myself being a head coach or coaching anywhere else.
That was even more definitive than what he said on the Cam Hayward show.
Yeah, absolutely. Doubled down on it. And what I appreciated too is kind of like the vulnerability piece of, he wasn't trying to shut down I never listened to anybody else. I was just, looking at what else.
Well, we know he listens to everyone. That's his greatest attribute. He doesn't actually know what he wants to do. He just talks to people he trusts, and they tell him what to do. And then he goes and does it, allegedly. For those who didn't watch our show last week, allegedly, that's the,
allegedly.
That's the rumor. So,
yeah. They do be saying, yeah, man.
That's the rumor. Yeah. It's a quote from Tombstone there, buddy. You must be Doc Holliday. That's the rumor. So you guys still got to watch Tombstone, man. You're missing out.
Man. No, I know it. But one of the things that I really appreciated about that comment, and we're seeing it in the chat, music to my ears, so good to hear that. And it was great to hear it in the audio yesterday when I was transcribing it. It was great to hear it on Cam Hayward's podcast. But I appreciated the vulnerability where he was like, I did talk to other people. And I did look to see what was out there. And through that process, it was confirmed to me that this is the place for me. And that is what, above all else, above the I want to retire here and the future is uncertain and this and that made me the most confident in.
Well done, Big. We both saw that at the same time.
That's so funny.
You just had Trev break character right there. Very well done.
Man.
Very well done. The LSU fan is not happy about Marcus Freeman being in it for the long haul. Well played, my friend. Well played.
That got me.
But no, it was good to hear. It was good to hear. There's not a lot else to say. I've always taken Marcus Freeman to be a man of his word. I've said this a million times. Marcus Freeman is one of the most authentic coaches in the world, in that he's not going to say something that's just a blatant lie. And, like that, there might be some like, okay, you ask him this, and of course he's not going to give you he can't give you the answer to that. But it's not like, hey, coach, what's going on here? And he's just like, no, this is the deal. And it's a complete lie. He's one of the more honest guys, and you got to know how to read him appropriately. But when he says something like that as emphatically as he's now said it 3 times this offseason, What was the first show he said it on? I can't remember the first show he said it on. It was a couple months ago. And then he said it on with Cam Hayward's podcast, and then he said it again yesterday. So maybe now he'll stop getting asked about it since he's been so emphatic about it, and you can write your article on it, and other people can write their articles on it, which will be good. And it's fine. And just so we're clear, it's a perfectly fine question for the Notre Dame media to ask him, because this is our first chance to ask him that question. Now, we did ask him about it in the spring, and so I'm okay with someone asking him about it one final time. But now hopefully we can move on from it and say, okay, he's answered this now 4 times, and he's been more emphatic each time. Let's just move on, and if it changes, it changes. But we don't have to keep talking about it.
Brian, let's talk about this ESPN article that came out yesterday here in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It was a really interesting read. And before people, obviously, when they hear, we're going to talk about something that came out on ESPN, there's this notion that's like, we're going to rip them to shreds. This was actually a really good article.
I can understand why people would think that.
Without a doubt. Believe me, more times than not, it's valid. More times than not, it's definitely valid. But this article from Bill Connolly was very interesting to read through. And it was about the biggest ifs for every team. And one of my biggest surprises is that it had more of like a positive connotation to it. It wasn't an article like, what if CJ Carr is not who we think he is?
Yeah.
Or like, what if Marcus Freeman fails again in September? It's, hey, if this works out for this team, they're going to be really good. And that's kind of the overall premise for this article. And obviously he ranked them in like different tiers of like, if there's 2 ifs, 3 ifs, 4 ifs. And he's talking about the top teams in college football: Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Indiana. Georgia,
and the better the team, the better the team, the fewer the ifs. And he did note, it was interesting, Trev, he said that nobody this year, it's the first time ever he's had anyone with only 2 ifs, which I thought was interesting.
Which kind of backs up what we've been talking about this season is wide open. We believe that there could be 6 to 7 really, really good teams in college football, but they have some things that they have to get answered. And this article kind of backs up that hypothesis. And it was a good read, man. But I'm with you. For the first time that he's done this, no 2 ifs.
I appreciated that it was taken from more of an this is a crazy statement, but it was an actual analysis article of college football. It wasn't clickbaity. Is Arch Manning overrated? No, it was. I mean, he said something about Arch Manning. If Arch Manning learns this one neat trick, and then he kind of gets into some things he's got to do as a player and gives stats, and he talks about, he was 82nd in completion percentage outside the pocket, 94th in completion rate on the move, and talked about he's got to, if he gets better at that, he's going to be really good. Offensive depth. So like even some of the things that were kind of negatives, it was more of a, if this works out okay, they're going to be really good, as opposed to kind of looking at from more from the negative standpoint. So I thought it was really well done, and it showed a good grasp of the teams. And when we look at the Notre Dame, the first one, Trev, he talked about if they're a second half of the season team. That was the first one he talked about. And, here's what he said. He goes, Notre Dame's 25 schedule is unfortunate in a couple different ways. Not only did it feature just a pair of particular CFP-worthy games, but those games also showed up in the first 2 weeks of the season, which when coach Marcus Freeman was breaking in a new quarterback and defensive coordinator. Carr took 1 week to get up to speed, and Ash needed 2. And by that point, the Irish were 0-2. Even while playing like a top 5 team the rest of the way, they eventually couldn't make up for that unfortunate start to the season. This season, the Irish again have a light schedule that will minimize their margin for error. But with those big games coming October 17th and November 7th, they can ease into that season a little bit. So he's talking about like if they're going to be a playoff team, they've got to be a good second half of the season team, meaning that's when all their big games are played. And he didn't even mention SMU, which I think has a chance to be their second toughest game this year. With all due respect to BYU, it would not shock me if SMU is the second best team they play this year.
No, that wouldn't surprise me either. The thing that I appreciated that Bill Connolly put that at number 1 is we have seen Marcus Freeman-led teams, especially the last 2 years, be really strong second-half teams. This can't be the year where that falters. They've ripped off 10 straight wins to end the regular season in each of the last 2 years. They did it in 2024 after a 1-1 start, and they did it in 2025 after an 0-2 start. This can't be the year where Notre Dame isn't playing their best football from mid-October to the end of the year because of those games, because of October 17th out in Provo, and because of November 7th and November 21st against Miami and SMU. I'm with you completely. You're muted.
Notre Dame has been a dominant team in November, no question. But we also have to be honest about what they've played in November. First year, they went 1-1 against ranked teams in November, beat Clemson convincingly, and then beat USC. They obviously won their bowl game. 2023, they didn't play anybody ranked in November, but did play a decent Clemson team on the road and lost. Then in 2024, they did beat 2 ranked teams in November, but it was actually it was one, Army. Navy was the last week in November. And then, Florida State wasn't very good. Virginia wasn't very good. USC wasn't very good. They're 6-6 team, talented, but not very good. And then last year they played Pitt, who was ranked, and they played Navy, who was ranked, but they were like borderline, like ranked 25th, ranked 22nd, and beat both teams convincingly. This is going to be a very different test in November than what they've had at any point in time in Marcus Freeman's tenure. The closest since 2022, when they played 2 top 5 teams in November, and they went 1-1 in those games. If they go 1-1 in those games now, but they're undefeated going into November, they're a playoff team, and they're hosting a playoff game. But you hope that they can run the table and really handle business. But that's what makes November. In the second half of the season, because again, Game 7, which second half, is the BYU game. So
there's a reason. Yeah, man, I'm with you. There's a reason why their over/under win total on FanDuel is over under 11.5 wins. They've shown before that they can be a strong second half team, but to your point, this is a much different test. And all you have to do is look back to who their opponent is on Senior Day. This is the toughest opponent Notre Dame has had on Senior Day, dating back before Marcus Freeman was the head coach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this isn't just in Marcus Freeman's time. I can't remember the last time they had an opponent like this come to South Bend on Senior Day.
Oh, dude. I'm actually going to try to look up their schedules, but it's been a long time. Very long time. I'm going to go through the record books. But yeah, you are correct. It's usually like Wake Forest, Syracuse. Yeah.
Boston College, they'll get on Senior Day sometimes.
Yeah. They've had BC a couple times. Yeah, you're correct. It's been a not a lot of really tough games for Notre Dame. I'm going to look up their record book here, Trev, and see if I can find that. But yeah, they have not played a lot of really good teams on Senior Day, and I'm kind of glad that they're going to have one. To be honest with you, I think not because I think it matters. I don't really care who they play on Senior Day, but just that they need to finally have some strong late season opponents. That's more of what I'm kind of looking for here.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the biggest gripes against them in the playoff discussion last year. It's just like who did you beat in November? And obviously you put on the road, but I mean the outlook this season, the outlook this season is definitely different than what it was last year.
I mean, Trev, we talked about that in 2024. We talked about that going into the playoffs. We talked about how I'm very curious to see how this team plays at home.
Yeah.
I mean, plays in the playoffs, having not played a tough game since maybe Louisville. USC was a competitive game, but they weren't very good. So I'm actually going back. 2021, they played Georgia Tech, who was bad. They won 55-0. 2020 Senior Day was Syracuse, who was terrible. 2019 was BC, who was terrible. 2018 was, let's see here, Florida State. Should have been a tough opponent, but they were terrible that year. Navy in 17. So they wore those terrible Rockney throwback uniforms. That was so bad. Last good team, the last ranked opponent that Notre Dame played at home on Senior Day was Virginia Tech back in 2016. You remember that?
Yeah.
That Justin Fuente team when Notre Dame lost that game late. Should have beat them. Yeah, so 2016 is the last time Notre Dame played a good team on Senior Day. And
so basically a decade.
Yep.
I mean, that's
Louisville
crazy.
in 2014 was a top 25 team that beat Notre Dame on Senior Day. So it's been a minute.
Okay,
it's been a minute.
That was sooner than what I thought. I thought it was Utah in 2010.
Oh yeah, that was a good one too.
That was the only one that my mind went to because I was at that game.
Well, and like a lot of Notre Dame fans, you've blocked 2016 and 2014 probably out of your mind,
especially by the time Senior Day was rolling around. Believe me.
Yeah.
My 2014 recollection stops after Florida State.
Yep, I get that.
That's where it ends for me. But no, it's a strong what if from Bill Connolly. The second one, Brian, is if the new run game clears the bar. Bill Connolly went on to say the Irish ranked first nationally in returning production with Carr. Number one target, Jordan Faison, a vastly experienced offensive line and most of an awesome defense returning. But running backs Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price both left to become first-round picks. Though Notre Dame pretty much always has a strong run game, replacements Aeneas Williams, Nolan James Jr. and company still have to meet a high standard.
Mm-hmm. It's very factual. The only thing I would have critiqued in that article, and we'll talk about it later, is I would have talked more about the offensive line.
Yep.
Besides just saying their experience. But no, he's correct. Look, the run game can't take a big step back. Because if the run game takes a big step back and that allows teams to more defend, like to focus on shutting down the pass game without fear of the run game, it makes it harder for this Notre Dame offense to thrive. I don't care how good you are as a quarterback. If teams know you're going to throw and they're like, I dare you to run because you can't run on us, it makes it a lot easier to defend that team. A lot easier. When you're playing good teams, it's not going to be easier for Purdue. It's not going to be easier for Navy necessarily. It's not going to be easier for Syracuse, but it's going to be easier for BYU, especially with the secondary they have. Hey, look, man, we're just going to go lock up on the outside and put our safeties down in the box, and shut down. We're going to have to do that because otherwise we can't stop this run game, and we're going to hope that our corners are good enough. But when you're not good running the football, it's like, well, we don't need to do that. We can now play our safeties off. We can double team. We can bracket. We can do these things to shut down the pass game because we can stop your run game with our box because you can't run the football. So it changes what you do. And then now it allows you as an offense to say, hey, look, we can go at those corners a little bit more effectively because we can get to go at those safeties more because they now have to still respect the run game. And if they don't, then we're going to have USC 2025 happen to them. And so he's right. That's if Notre Dame's run game is as good as we think it's going to be, you and I, that's going to be a big part of Notre Dame being a team that can win a championship. Because what his ifs are basically about, this is what he said. He goes, for the past 7 seasons, I've taken that pre-made list of contenders and looked at how many ifs are required to make that team champs. So that's the premises. This is what's going to make them win championships. And then the last one from him was if a big play receiver emerges.
Yeah, that was a hot topic of discussion in the show that we broke down yesterday, ranking the position groups most important to, I guess, the proverbial least important. You're going to need them all. But Bill Connolly also touches on it in his article. He talks about Malachi Fields. He caught only 36 passes last year, but 4 gained at least 40 yards, 14 gained at least 20 yards. He's gone. As are Notre Dame's next 2 most frequent big play pass catchers. And then he has a graphic in there talking about Malachi Fields, Eli Raridan, and Will Pauling. But then he said between veterans such as Faison and Jaden Greathouse and youngsters such as Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, and transfers Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter, someone needs to make up that big play gap, which is something that we've also talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've mentioned, it's like, do they have to go be Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson? No. Do they have to go be Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle from 2020? No. Neither of those options hurt their chances of winning a national title. But the way that Notre Dame is constructed, they don't need that, but they do need a reliable weapon, ideally reliable weapons, but at least a reliable weapon to go out and make those plays.
Yeah, see, so because if one guy does it, great. My only nit with the point he made is I don't think it has to be a guy. If there is a guy, great. I'm not going to say it's better to have 3 really good players than to have Jeremiah Smith. I'm not saying I would love to have Jeremiah Smith. I'm simply saying that I watched Jeremiah Smith go for like 8 catches for 144 yards in the quarterfinal playoff game, and his team only scored 14 points. Why? Because nobody else could do anything.
Yep. And in the same vein, we also watch him have 1 catch for 3 yards, and they win a semifinal game.
Exactly. That's a great point. And we watched the star for the other team in that game have 5 catches for 16 yards, and his team won. Why? Because other guys stepped up and made plays in that game, including the defense. So, but the point is, you need people, or at least one or multiples, ideally multiples, because that's what made, like, people forget. Jeremiah Smith did very little against Notre Dame until that last play near the end of the game. Why? Because Notre Dame did a good job of putting, I think Christian Gray did a good job on him. Leonard Moore did a great job on him. And Jeremiah Smith has said the best cornerback he's faced so far. He was asked before last season, and he said it was Leonard Moore. But but what hurt Notre Dame that game? 2 things. One, other guys stepped up. Cardinal Tate had a good game. Emeka Egbuka had a good game. The running backs ran the ball well. But when the game was on the line, where'd they go? They went to Jeremiah. It's nice to have that if you can have it. But you don't need to be Jeremiah Smith, because where was Notre Dame going with the football every clutch moment against Penn State? We all knew where they were going with the football, and there was nothing, and Penn State knew, and there was still nothing they could do about it because Jaden was still going to get open and make a play in that game. And so maybe one week it's Jaden Greathouse. Maybe the next week it's Jordan Faison. Maybe the next week it's Mylan Graham. Maybe the next week it's hopefully Cam Williams. But you need to have receivers step up for big plays. You can't be a dink and dunk offense all year, because that makes you easier to defend, because you can now bring everybody closer, which then also makes it easier to defend the run. So that's the big key, is you have to have some big-time playmakers step up a receiver. Now, and I think the point he made was valid. We've kind of talked about that. Jordan Faison is not a guy that caught a lot of deep balls last year. We've talked about that. And that's where I think the staff needs to expand his game and his role, and get him involved more on the run, overs, crossers, digs, pivots, things like that, in screen game, and letting him get the ball in space more and on the run more. But that's not going to be it. You've got to have the ability to throw the ball down the field. Is there someone like a Malachi Fields who can take the top of the defense off with a post route like we saw last year? That's a great question. We don't know the answer to that. I think there's guys who can do it, but no one's proven it. So I think it's a very valid point to say that it needs to emerge. My only nit is I don't think it needs to be a guy. It can be multiples, and I think that actually makes you more dangerous.
That kind of feeds into, to give you guys a window in here, we're going to give our biggest ifs for Notre Dame's team. And I'm going to work a little bit back to front with my list, just so we don't harp on it here in a little bit down the road. But one of my ifs is to the point that we're talking about. It's if the receiving room as a whole lives up to the talent expectation. We joked about it earlier in the offseason of like, here we go again. We're at the point where we're talking about Notre Dame's receiving core could be this, they could be that, based on the this in the room and the that in the room. But there's a lot of reason to be positive about this group, and that's a big if. Now, I talked about it yesterday in the show with Vince when we were ranking those position groups. And when we got to the wide receiving room, I said, look, I'm a firm believer that Notre Dame can make another run to the title with just a great run game and really, really elite defense. But you're going to come across an opponent that is going to be able to move the ball on your defense. It's just with the level of offenses that are going to be in the college football playoff this year, the level of quarterback play, the talent on the perimeter, you're going to come across an offense that is able to match or come close to matching what you have. Every opponent they face in the postseason isn't going to be BYU. That just can't compete with you on the perimeter. And you're also going to face a defense, whether that's Ohio State's, Oregon's, maybe Texas if they take a jump, Indiana's, that will be able to prevent you from rushing for 200 yards. You're going to come across a game where you need your wide receiving core to step up. And that's one of the big ifs. If they can answer the bell in that big game, because we've seen Notre Dame receivers before in the past, rip off 100-yard games against Central Michigan and NC State. And,
I love what you're saying, Trev, because 2023 was one of the most explosive Notre Dame offenses in a long time. Scored 39 points a game. Tons of big plays in the pass game. Sam Hartman averaged like almost 9 yards an attempt, which at the time was like their highest. I mean, only Jimmy Clausen was near that. I mean, it was a really explosive pass attack. He was 8.9 yards per attempt, and Steve Angeli was 11.5. As an offense, they were 9.1. Numbers looked great. But here's the problem. That was only against the teams that weren't that good. Ohio State, 7.0 yards per attempt. Duke, 7.4 yards per attempt. Louisville, 6.7 yards per attempt. Clemson, 4.9 yards per attempt. And I would argue that in one of those games, two of those games, I'd say Sam Hartman didn't play well. He didn't play well against Clemson. He didn't play well against Ohio State. But against Duke and Louisville, it was on the receivers and the O-line. Against Duke, you remember the ball that Tobias Merriweather dropped. And there was a couple other times where receivers weren't doing what they needed to do in those matchups. You think of the Louisville game, Chris Tyree drops what should have been a touchdown that would have given Notre Dame, I think, a third quarter lead in that game. So they had to settle for a field goal. That changed the momentum of that game. You think of the big play to Mitchell Evans. They got called back because of an offensive penalty. It was a hands to the face, which is like, you can say whatever you want about Joe Rudolph. I know he doesn't teach that.
Right.
And so in some of those big games, the receivers didn't step up and play well. They didn't play very well against USC. And, great. They went out and torched, like, to your point, Central Michigan. And then, of course, they play a 3-9 Pitt team, and it's 11.5 yards per attempt. They play a bad Wake Forest team, it jumps up to 9.6. Play a bad Stanford team, jumps up to 10.0. And there was this big gap. So they had 6 games that year with Sam Hartman where they averaged over 10 yards per attempt. And they were between 10.0 and 12.7. And then Wake was 9.6. But in the other 5 games that he played, so there were 7 with 9.6 or above. In the other 5 games they played, they didn't even get to 7.5. So it was like this big gap. And it just so happened that most of those were against teams that were good. It was against the 5 worst games that year, yards per attempt, were against Ohio State, Louisville, Clemson, Duke, who would have been ranked if Riley Leonard didn't get hurt. They were ranked at the time. They'd already beaten Clemson. They would have stayed ranked if Riley doesn't get hurt. And then USC, who at the time was ranked. And that game was more about they jumped on him kind of big early with turnovers and things like that, and the offense wasn't really trying to throw the ball down the field in that game. But it's another game where the receivers didn't play very well. So, and let's be real, the Duke and Ohio State games were primarily Mitchell Evans being ridiculous in those 2 games.
Yeah.
That's where the pass game, it was even worse if Mitchell Evans doesn't go off. It would have been even worse. So you are correct. That's a great point. It's not about numbers, because numbers can be padded by beating up on bad teams, especially this year. It's about what do you do against BYU? What do you do against Miami? What do you do against SMU? And what do you do in the playoffs? That's what matters.
Without a doubt. What are some of your ifs?
Along your lines, I look at it more as a CJ Carr thing. If CJ Carr is as good as we think he's going to be, I truly believe that a great quarterback can elevate good receivers to make them really good, or really good receivers into elite status. You know, was Ed McCaffrey an elite receiver or a great receiver in the NFL? I think he was good, but there's a reason that Ed McCaffrey's production was better when playing with John Elway than really anybody else.
Sure.
You know, I mean, he had some good years after, but like his career was revitalized when he started playing for John Elway. You know, you look at the first, he played 3 years with the Giants, never had more than 610 yards, played with the Niners for a year, had 131. Then he comes and he starts playing with the Broncos. And in year 2 and 3, he sets his career best touchdown mark in his second year with the Broncos, beats that in his 3rd year, beats that in his 4th year, and has his first 1,000-yard season in 1998. How many guys have their first 1,000-yard season in the 8th year of their career? You know, and kind of it helped revitalize his career and, you know, made him look better than he was. Now, please hear what I'm saying. Ed McCaffrey was a good football player.
Yep.
Because he also had a couple 1,000-yarders when Elway retired, but I think like Elway kind of helped Ed McCaffrey, like, hey, dude, you're pretty good, you know, and you look at what he did with Rod Smith and you look like, I think Mark Clayton and Mark Duper were really good receivers. Do they have the production that they had if Dan Marino's not throwing them the football? No, I don't think so. So I think CJ can have that kind of ability where, yeah, the receivers need to do this, this, and this, but it's kind of partly on you also to make them better. Put that ball out there where only they got a shot to go get it. Because if you're willing to do that, then that elevates their play. Hey, I need to go out there and do this because if I do this, CJ's going to get me the ball. You know, like you want receivers running hard on backside routes, throw them the ball when they're the backside target. Because first time that they don't do that on a backside dig, the X receivers kind of, or the W is kind of dragging, going 3/4 speed because you didn't think he's going to get the ball. And a CJ comes to that backside dig and he misses it by 1.5 feet and the safety picks it off. Who do you think the coaches are going to be yelling at? It's not going to be CJ Carr. At least it better not be. It's going to be, hey, man, quarterback's trying to come to you. Why were you going half butt? Oh, because you didn't think you were going to get the ball? Give me somebody else. Or learn. You guy learns from it. So that's also partly on CJ as well. Hey, man, I need you to be going full out here. We had 15 receivers on scholarship, right? If you need a breather, tap out, and we'll get somebody in. You know what I mean? But like when you're in there, I need you going all out because I can come to you on these routes. Now, some routes, Trev, are to where if you're not the primary read, you're not getting the ball. If so maybe you can do like a little fake and just, I'm trying to occupy this guy. I understand that. But a lot of routes, you're going to be the guy that you need to go, you need to give me something. You need to run this route like you're the number one target because you may end up being my number one target on that. That's on CJ. It's for you to hold the receivers accountable. Last year, it didn't bother me that he wasn't doing that because first year starter. But now, If Jordan Faison's not going hard on a route, Jaden Greathouse isn't giving you everything he needs to give you. Mylan Graham isn't. Micah Gilbert isn't. Cam Williams isn't. Quincy Porter isn't. Logan Saw, whoever, Elijah Burris, that's on you now. You're the leader of this offense. If your receivers aren't going full speed when they're running routes, that's now on you because you've allowed that to happen. And I need you to fix it in practice. I need you to fix it, first of all, over the summer. And then you need to fix it in practice and in the film room. Hey, man, I wanted to come to you here, but you didn't think you were going to get the ball, so you were jogging. I was running 3 routes in a row. Tap out then. It didn't hurt us this week against Purdue, but if we're doing that against Georgia in the playoffs, that could cost us the ball game. Like you gotta hold them accountable. That's part of your leadership. So that's why I say for me, if CJ Carr is the player we think he is, because being the player we think he is isn't just about can he check into the right plays and does he have accuracy. Being a great quarterback is also about leadership. And I say he's an elevator, and you need an elevator at quarterback. And what that means is, can you elevate the town around you up to your level? Can you get them to be the best that they can be because of how you play and how you hold them accountable and all those type of things? And so how many times last year, Trev, did I point out that Jordan Faison or Will Pauling were going half speed when they didn't think they were going to get the ball?
Yeah.
Everybody's, CJ only threw. What was it, the Boise game? Will Pauling twice in that game had over the middle routes where he didn't think he was going to be the number one target, and CJ throws the ball and he's not running full speed. Or he's running a dig route and he doesn't think he's going to get the ball and he's not running full speed. And CJ looks for him and he's not there, and then he's got to go somewhere else. That's on the receiver. In 2026, that's on CJ. Because you got to make sure that they understand you can't do that anymore. Or, I'm not going to look for you. So if you want the ball, then run like you want the ball. That's what I want to see.
I'm with you. The final 2 ifs you and I have are virtually identical. And so I added one and I didn't text it over to you. I forgot to send it over before the show started. But my last if before we get to the 2 that we see very similar is if Notre Dame is able to hang on to and keep the pain of the snub from last season.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest. One of my biggest concerns is that they exercise a lot of those demons up, in the first 6 weeks of the season. It's like, people are going to be afraid to play us and people aren't going to want to play us. They're not going to have a good time. Well, there's a good chance that all 6 of their first games are by double digits.
Should be.
Wins by double digits and should be, to your point. They did it 10 games in a row last year, including 2 ranked opponents.
They've done it for 2 years in a row. I mean, look, they've won 24 games in the last 2 years. 2 of them were by single digits.
Louisville and Penn State.
And Louisville scored last
to
make it a 7-point game.
One of my biggest concerns for this team is they exercise those demons in the first month and a half of the season. And then that fire that made them so dangerous in the first 6 games is kind of dwindling when they go out to BYU. Having said that, the reason why it's an if for me is if they do keep that throughout the season, this team is going to be incredibly hard to beat. I think they will be already because of the level of the talent on both sides of the ball, what's coming back on the sideline, and all of those things that we've talked about. But that's my final if before we get into the 2 that we see identically is if they're able to keep that fire over the course of the season, this is going to be one of the hottest teams in college football because they had that fire after they lost to Texas A&M and were one of the hottest teams in college football last year to finish off 2025. I just hope that fire doesn't start to dwindle a little bit after they've exercised some of those demons and are back out playing against people that aren't themselves, not in a practice setting. That's another if for me as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with that. That's a good one, Trev. I'll give you a couple others that I have. Well, one that we're similar on is if for Notre Dame, if the line play is as good as we think it's going to be. We rank number 1 as Notre Dame is, I think, the number 2 offensive line in college football. And I'm not going to give too much away, but they're going to be top 5 when we do our defensive line show later in the day. If Notre Dame is going to be the team that they're going to be that's going to make a run at a championship, they've got to be as good as we think they're going to be in the trenches. And we saw that in the postseason. They beat Georgia in the trenches, won that game. Beat Indiana in the trenches, won that game. Got outplayed in the trenches in the first half against Penn State, trailed 10-3 at halftime. Beat Penn State in the trenches in the second half, outscored Penn State 24 to, was it 24-14 in the second half when they won the battle in the trenches. And if it wasn't for Riley just making one of very few, but he didn't make a lot of mistakes in the postseason. He was great in the postseason. The one big mistake he made was trying to throw over top of denied Dennis Sutton. It's like he just did. It's one of those plays where you could tell he just assumed the coverage was going to be something, didn't even think about denied Dennis Sutton dropping into coverage, and just threw it to him. You don't do that. Notre Dame was on the verge of running Penn State off the field in the second half of that game. It happens, and Penn State battled back and took advantage of it. And then to his credit, Riley answered. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't let it get him down. He answered. But and then in the championship game, first drive of the game, Notre Dame took it right to Ohio State's defense. Right down the field, long drive, touchdown. That's when dominating Ohio State in the trenches stopped. And the rest of the game, Ohio State dominated Notre Dame in the trenches, and that's why they won that football game. I mean, it's a big reason why they won that football game. And so now you get into a situation where if Notre Dame wants to win it all, it's what you got to do. You got to be able to, at the very least, when you're playing teams that have great line play, stalemate in the trenches. The very least. But you've got to win those battles in the trenches. And if they're as good as we think they are, then they should be able to do that against just about anybody this season.
I'm with you with the trenches conversation. Mine was geared more towards the offensive line, but echo everything that you said about the defensive line. If this offensive line is what we believe it to be, I have no concerns about them taking a step back in the run game. I have no concerns about them keeping CJ Carr's jersey clean against the majority of all teams that they're going to face on a consistent basis. Is a team going to get a sack against Notre Dame? Yes. Joe Moore award-winning offensive lines allow at least a sack in a season. But I'm talking on a consistent basis in the big moments, because we've talked a lot about, you got to move Anthony Knapp inside the guard. It's where he projects the highest. He's got to live up to that expectation. It's, hey, I've been riding the Gerby Lambert train hard this offseason, talking about how he's not getting enough preseason recognition. He could be their best offensive lineman. We've talked a lot about Will Black and Ashton Craig staying healthy. If that unit is what we believe it to be, this offense is going to be exceptionally difficult to stop. They were last year, and they suffered injuries, losing their left guard for the season at the midway point, their center at the midway point, their tackle started out the season on a horrible note. That offense was still incredibly hard to stop. So I'm with you completely.
My last one, Trev, and this is one where we're kind of on the same page. If Chris Ash is as good as Marcus Freeman thinks he is, and as good as other people. I was on yesterday. I was on with on the Columbus station with Josh Perry, who played at Ohio State, played for Chris Ash. He was a starting linebacker for that Ohio State team that won a national championship with Chris Ash as their defensive coordinator, and also was the starting linebacker for him in 2015, when I believe that was the best team in college football. They just had one bad Saturday against Michigan State, and that kept them out of the playoffs. And we've talked about this. If there was a 12-team playoff back then, I think Ohio State wins the title in 20. I think they're back-to-back champions, because I think their 2015 team was way better than their 2024 team, way better. And so, but look, so he knows them, and he thinks very highly of him. You could tell in the way he asked me questions yesterday. So there's a lot of people in the business that think Chris Ash is a really good football coach, and we're not saying he isn't. If they're right, and the real Chris Ash is the Chris Ash we saw the last 8 games of last season, from a result standpoint, then Notre Dame's going to be hard to beat. Because look, forget how we rank the defense. Forget our rankings of the Notre Dame defense. Obviously, people know we're very high on this football team. We think this team is talented, and but it's easy for people to say, well, yeah, you guys are Notre Dame guys. You've got an audience that you've got to make happy. That's fine. It's BS. That's not who we are. We give our honest opinion even when it doesn't make people happy. But let's just say, okay, let's take that out of the equation. I understand we're biased witnesses. Okay, cool. Phil Steele, Notre Dame defensive line, number 5 in the country. Notre Dame linebackers, number 1 in the country. Notre Dame secondary, number 1 in the country. That not exactly a Notre Dame homer, correct? Let's go to old Athlon. Not exactly a site that's has a Notre Dame bias. I don't know that they have a bias towards anyone, but it's not like a pro Notre Dame magazine. Notre Dame defensive line, number 2 in the country. Notre Dame linebackers, number 2 in the country. Notre Dame secondary, number 1 in the country. Greg McElroy has so far this offseason ranked the offensive line, D-lines, and linebackers, and I believe he ranked Notre Dame number 1 at linebacker, number 1 in the secondary, and I think number 3 on the D-line.
Yes, sir.
David Pollock ranked his top 5 D-lines, and I think he had Notre Dame 5 or 4, I believe. So this isn't just the Notre Dame guys think this defense is loaded. Everybody thinks this defense is loaded. And if Chris Ash is the coach that everybody tells us he is, which is a really good coach, Marcus Freeman swears he's a really good coach. If they're right, and we're not saying he isn't, this is an if. If they're right, this defense is going to be, honestly, the best in college football. And certainly championship caliber, whether they're 1, 2, or 3. Like, it doesn't matter if they're number 1. If they're in the top 3, that's a defense good enough to win a championship. Who had the best defense in college football last year? Well, statistically, it was Ohio State. They were one and done in the postseason because their offense wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
Their defense isn't why they didn't win a championship last year. Their defense gave up, 17 points to Miami? That should have been good enough to win a championship because they lost 24-14, but they had a pick 6. But, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this, Trev, is if Chris Ash is as good as people who I respect think that he is, then this team will be a championship caliber team. I did want to just talk about a couple others, Trev. There were a couple other interesting ones that I wanted to get into that I thought were fun because he had 9 teams that, let me find it. Where is here we go. No, that's the, did you see the Athletic article about the quarterback tiers? I thought that was interesting. We'll have to talk about that one next as well. They had CJ Carr, I think number 2 or 3. But anyway, they had 9 teams in the top, 9 teams with 3 ifs, which I thought was very interesting. At Ohio State, and they went by national title odds is how they put them. So they had, and I don't know whose odds these are, but they had Ohio State at plus 600. They had Notre Dame at plus 650. They were second. What is the FanDuel odds for Notre Dame? Are they still second?
Yeah, they're second.
FanDuel?
So these might be FanDuels, but I know there's not a lot of difference between like FanDuel, DraftKings, like other Vegas sports books like that.
Okay. While you're doing this, can you just look up the FanDuel for Notre Dame? But they have Ohio State at number 1 at 600, Notre Dame at 2 at 650, and then the number 3 team is Texas at 750, which means Notre Dame in odds is closer to number 1 Ohio State than they are number 3 Texas. They had Indiana next. They had Oregon, Georgia, Miami. There was a big gap between Georgia and Miami, which I found very surprising. And then
these betting odds are from ESPN, from like ESPN
Okay.
Bet, like that's their sports book.
And then LSU and Texas Tech. I was really surprised at LSU in there, to be honest with you. And we maybe talk about some of the absurdity being talked about with LSU. And if I'm an LSU fan, I'm not happy with the things that are being said on ESPN right now about LSU. I'm serious. Like, if they don't make the championship game, it's a disappointing season. That's retarded. That's ridiculous.
That is crazy.
Like, what you're doing is you're setting a standard for, if they don't reach this, then we can hammer them for it. Well, if they're a 9-3 team against that schedule with having to they brought in 30-something, 40-something portal guys. You had to completely remake the roster.
Yeah.
If they're 9-3 against that schedule, that's a good season for LSU. Like, what are we talking about here? Well, he left he left a program that he built for 6 years to go to one he has to rebuild from year 1. And somebody said Jordan Rodgers is an idiot. He is. But he's not the only one that said it. Ben Watson said it too. I respect Ben Watson. I think Ben Watson's a really sharp guy, former Georgia tight end. He said it yesterday. And there's these, you're right. I'm watching as he's saying it. Cole Kibbelik's just looking forward, like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. It was hilarious, but it's crazy. It's creating a narrative that you can then use to either say, see, we told you so, or you can use to just keep hammering on them throughout the season. It's silly. It's absolutely silly.
It's terrible takes.
But having LSU there is like, okay, come on, guys. What are we doing here? But anyway, Trev, what were you going to thoughts on that? That 9?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's the correct 9. I mean, I'm a firm believer that there's about 6 to 7 teams right now that have a legitimate shot at winning a national title. And the conversation behind those is who enters that conversation. Is it LSU? Is it Oklahoma? Is it Alabama?
Oklahoma would be the team I'd have instead of LSU.
As would I. But it's all a race to it. Like, every team has a debate. The farther down you get on that list, it's definitely more of a stretch. And but having said that, I agree with some of the ifs that they have for LSU. I
Yeah.
just think that they have more than 3.
That's where I'm at. Yes. If Lane Kiffin is a QB whisperer, which I think he kind of is,
Yeah.
we talked about this. That's why it was smart for Sam Levitt to go there.
Yeah.
If another remodeled offensive line holds up, fair. If the portal delivered on the defensive line, also fair. But my whole thing is, well, if their receivers are good enough, I think there's just this assumption that their receivers are going to be great, just like they assumed it the last 2 years with the portal pickups, and they weren't. You know, I'm with you. I think there's more to it if they can manage a really tough schedule. There's 3 teams that had 4 ifs: A&M, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma. I think Ole Miss has more than 4. That's another one, but I think A&M is at 4 because A&M doesn't have a lot of ifs. Their ifs are huge, in my opinion. Like, I don't know that they're going to survive those ifs. And then they had 3 teams with 5 ifs: Alabama, USC, and Michigan. And so I don't think BYU has a lot of ifs. BYU doesn't have more than 5 ifs. It's just their ifs are smaller in number, but ginormous in, like, they're not going to live up to that.
Their ifs are like if they can play above their God-given ability on the perimeter. It's like it's stuff like that. Where some of these other teams, like if so-and-so starts, if Notre Dame's run game is a little bit better than what we thought, if Arch Manning can be more consistent, one of those things. But I'm with you there with BYU.
Yep. So I thought that was interesting. But as I said, Trev, reading through these, I thought that they were fair. Ohio State, if the portal delivered a pass defense, fair. If Jeremiah Smith has battery mates, fair. And if new OC Arthur Smith can pick up the pace, again, also fair. I don't know that there's a lot outside of that, because I think those things those are my big concerns. We talked about Notre Dame's. Texas is we talked about the Arch Manning, if the offensive line depth isn't an issue, and if Will Muschamp can still craft an elite D. I think those are fair. I don't think I have a lot of ifs for them outside of that. Indiana was if Josh Hoosier is 90% Fernando. I thought that was one of my favorite things that he said.
Yeah.
Because Josh Hoover doesn't have to be Fernando Mendoza. But if he's 90% of Fernando, then he's going to be really good. And I think that's kind of what he is.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to make more plays than Fernando did, but he's also going to make more mistakes than Fernando did. And so I thought that was good. And if the portal delivered a defensive line, very fair. And if the portal delivered a secondary, very fair.
If Josh Hoover can be Francisco Mendoza, they might be cooking with grease.
Yes.
But
for sure.
Man.
I kind of think there's a 4th one with Indiana. I don't know that their receiving core is guaranteed to be as good as people think it's going to be.
Agreed.
Like, I don't know that Nick Marsh is Elijah Sherrod. Now, talent-wise, sure, but is he clutch? Is he Omar Cooper? Can Charlie Becker be the number 1? We've seen before, Trev, where a guy's really good and puts up big numbers as the number 2 or number 3, but when he becomes the number 1, he can't handle that role. Remember Alvin Harper for the Cowboys back in the day? That's probably a little before your time. He was kind of the big, tall guy, played at Tennessee, was the number 2 to Michael Irvin. Then he signs a free agent contract with the Buccaneers for a lot of money, and he disappears.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot easier to be good when I'm playing opposite Michael Irvin and teams are focused on Jay Novacek and trying to stop Emmitt Smith behind the best line in the NFL. It's a lot easier for me to be good. But when I'm the guy, it's a little harder. And so I thought that was very, very interesting to see.
One of the ifs I would have had in there for Alabama is if they can handle the foundational losses. Not on their coaching staff, because you have continuity at your head coach, offensive and defensive coordinator. But when I'm talking about foundational losses, I'm talking about Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons, Mikhail Kamara, Elijah Surratt, a lot of the guys that helped engineer and turn around Indiana's football program. If they're able to handle those losses, because now Indiana's portal cycle just looks like every other major team's portal cycle. D lineman from Notre Dame, wide receiver from another Big Ten school, quarterback from a Big 12 school, safety from an SEC school. If they're able to handle some of those foundational losses, this team is going to be gelling, and we will know that Kurt Cignetti's culture in Bloomington is as sound as ever.
Yep.
But that's another if for them as well.
Yep.
In my eyes.
Yep. It was fun. It was fun to read through this. The Oregon one was interesting. I thought that was one you might have had a 2. But I was glad he said 3, because I think there are. If the offensive line holds up, that is without a doubt the very, very biggest thing. Oregon is like a top 5 team in like quarterback, running back, receiver potentially, D-line, secondary, not linebacker. But if your weakest position is linebacker, you're fine. Like you're okay. The offensive line is not in the top 10 and not even close to the top 10. That is going to be a big one. If the defense finds a few more negative plays, that one I don't necessarily agree with because that's just not their style. Georgia wasn't a big negative play team in 2021 or 2022 either. And they're essentially a 4-down version of what Georgia was in 21 and 22. Because like they actually, one of their edge players, they don't even list as a defensive lineman. The kid, the 2 T's, TT. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I need to get with somebody to help me to better pronounce Polynesian names because I mean no disrespect. I just have no ability to pronounce their names. Tuiati, but they count him as an outside linebacker on their roster. So they're kind of a 3-down team. And so you look at like where they ranked last year in tackles for loss per game. And let me pull it up here real quick, Trev. They ranked last year 97th in tackles for loss per game. That's not great, but I don't think it's like this terrible number because of how they play. You look at 2022, Georgia in 2022 ranked 58th at 6.1, and Georgia in 21 ranked 37th at 6.7. So like they're not too far off, in my opinion, from being that. Michigan was 76th in 2023 at 5.5. So we haven't seen a lot of teams that are just like, wow. I mean, Indiana was obviously last year. And Ohio State was like top 30-ish in 2024. So just the way that they play, I don't think that's as big of a need as I think Bill Connelly thinks it is. They got to get better, but I don't know that they need to make that. I don't know if it's like number 2. And then if Dan Lanning can figure out the postseason is a pretty big one.
Agreed.
I'd put that up at number 1.
I also would as well. Of the entire article, the only one that I thought was missing, and maybe this is just my little personal vendetta against USC, but I don't know why Jade Maeva's performance in big games wasn't discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Like my biggest if for that offense is if Jade Maeva can elevate his performance in big games. In the 2 biggest games that he played in last year against Notre Dame and USC, he just wasn't good. He threw for a lot of yards, which I think he threw for over 300 yards against both Oregon and Notre Dame, but did not score over 27 points in either of those games. And so I think that masks a little bit what he actually is. He's very turnover prone in big moments. And with games coming down the pipe against Oregon, Washington, Penn State on the road, Wisconsin on the road, Ohio State at home, Indiana on the road, UCLA on the road, that is a major if. But maybe that's just a little bit of my personal vendetta with USC, but that's a major if that I have. Because if Jade Maeva is in those games who he was against Oregon last year and Notre Dame last year, USC's dark horse journey to win, their odyssey, I guess, is going to end pretty quickly because they're not going to be out there making any sort of run at the college football playoff.
Oh, I love that.
Thanks.
That was great. That was absolutely great. If I'm doing the math correctly, I believe that, yes, last year against ranked teams, USC ranked 106th in college football in interceptions. And ironically, Oregon was next at 8. Dante Moore had 8 interceptions in now one more game. So he played one more game. So one more interception in one more game. And I hear a lot of people talk about how Dante's got to play better in against ranked opponents. We could have that conversation, but like 2 of those picks came in a blowout win over James Madison, but like I hear people talk about that when they're talking about Dante Moore, but nobody talks about it with Jade Maeva. And I don't understand it. I'm with you on that. I don't get it. I really don't get it. And he only had 10 touchdown passes. So, I mean, it's not like he's out there ripping it up. So if you're going to criticize Dante Moore for how he played in big games, and you need to be more willing to criticize Jade Maeva. And I feel like he gets a pass for all everybody ever wants to talk about with Josh Hoover's turnovers. It's worse to throw 10 picks in USC's offense than it is to throw 14 in Texas TCU's. Because Lincoln Riley's offense is not geared to turning the ball over. You just don't see it. And the only other quarterback I've seen that was turnover prone in Lincoln Riley's offense from an interception standpoint is Miller Moss.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Caleb Williams threw 5 in each of his 2 years with Lincoln Riley. You look at his tenure at Oklahoma, same kind of deal. Guys just don't throw interceptions. Caleb Williams only threw 4, and even Spencer Riley threw 9 in 2021, which is a terrible year for them. And Jalen Hurts didn't throw interceptions. Kyler Murray didn't throw interceptions. Baker Mayfield didn't throw interceptions. This offense is not geared towards throwing 10+ interceptions, especially against a not very tough schedule, which is what they played last year. So I'm with you on that one.
Brian, it's time to preview Notre Dame's 8th opponent of the regular season here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Talking about the Navy midshipmen, one of their longest-standing rivals. Actually, their longest-standing rival, not one of. This opponent they played the most in program history, and the midshipmen are in for a very, very interesting season because, in one hand, the G5 is wide open with guys like Alex Golesh and John Summerall and Ryan Silverfield all leaving the likes of the G5 and then moving up. But Navy had some losses of their own and all things that we're going to dive into. But, before we get into it, Brian, I know this is a rivalry that you and I believe should stick for the duration of time, for all of the reasons, the history that goes into this rivalry, the level of respect that these two opponents have. And I know that they're always going to catch flack every year. Notre Dame could go undefeated and beat 5 ranked opponents. Somebody will always bring up the fact that they play Navy.
Yep.
But this is a rivalry that
the only people that ever say that are people that have never played Navy.
Yeah, have never played Navy or did not go undefeated or did not make the playoffs. And so they have to find something to nitpick. So that's where I'm at with this one, man. But I know we're getting ready to break down the opponent and talk about what's at stake for them this season, what's potentially coming down the pipe for them. But first and foremost, I just want to say this is a rivalry that I absolutely love that Notre Dame has every year.
This is a rivalry, and I've heard people talk about it, that they, we need to get rid of Navy. We've already done this. We've already done that for them. We don't owe them anything else, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, at what point in time do you not owe the person that saved your life, so to speak? I don't look at it that way. I don't like that people look at it that way. There's no harm in playing them. Now, one of the things that people point to that used to be a legitimate thing was the fact that Navy used to be kind of dirty, to be honest with you. The way that sometimes it was intentional, sometimes it was just more a byproduct of the type of offense that they ran. When cut blocking, the way it used to be legal, was legal, it was understandable. Notre Dame would have injuries in those games, and it seemed like they had a D lineman or a linebacker go down every year. It was Jerron Jones, Joe Schmidt. It seemed like every year, but the rules are such now that that's not really a problem anymore. You don't see it because you're just not seeing the same type of cut blocks that there used to be in the sport. And so I love this rivalry. I think there's a lot of respect between the two programs. I think that one thing I like as well, Trev, is I could be wrong, but my impression of Brian Newberry is that he understands what this game means and has shown, in my opinion, a healthy respect for Notre Dame that I'm happy to see, to be honest with you. And that's good. And I think Ken Niumatalolo at first did not have a healthy view of this rivalry. He's kind of disrespectful to Notre Dame, to be completely honest with you. And I wasn't a big fan of him early in his tenure, but his last 4 or 5 years, I thought that he figured it out. Like, hey, this is actually something special. And there was a different level of respect, in my opinion, that he showed Notre Dame than what we saw early in his tenure. And that's why I'm like I said, I'm a big fan of this rivalry. I have a great deal of respect for these young men. I read something somewhere, I think it was like an O-line article, or maybe it was in one of the magazines, where it's like, when you're playing these teams, you got to remember something. These kids, when they're not at football practice, they're practicing to go to war, like literally go to war. And that's a different breed of young person. And I think playing a team like that, the discipline that it takes to play a team like that, is good for your football team. Now that you've kind of removed some of the cut blocking injury type of stuff from the conversation, because I think there's a level of, yes, you should beat that team, but you're only going to beat that team if you're disciplined, if you're this, if you're that. And I think there's great lessons to be learned from playing that kind of football team.
Yeah.
And so there are no negatives. And now that they're a G5, I mean, they're an American Conference team. They're in the best G5 league. They're very competitive in that league. That to me, there's no drawback anymore to playing them.
No, not at all. If you want to beat Navy, you have to respect the rivalry, because if you overlook them, that style of play and how they play, not saying that is like the dirtiness, it's just literally schematic how they run their offense. They'll sneak up and get beat. It happened to Oklahoma. But let's dive into Navy and what's kind of on the docket for them this season. And the biggest talking point with the midshipmen is this is the post-Blake Horvath era. Now, it's an interesting conversation looking at it through a Notre Dame lens, because the last 2 years, they played him in 2024 and he was banged up. His thumb was hurt. He could barely hold on to the football. And then last year, 2 hours before kickoff, he was ruled out. And so they started Braxton Woodson. But for Navy in general, he's been a big driver of their success on offense. He, Alex Tetska, and Eli Heidenreich, who I believe was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers.
He was. Yeah.
Were they
had
the
two
driver?
guys drafted last year.
Yeah, Landon Robinson as well.
Yep,
I think he was the Bengals. Yeah. So were they the drivers of success? Was it Drew Cronick, the offensive coordinator? Was it Brian Newberry, the head coach? I'm very intrigued to find out the answers for what Navy's going to be in this post-Blake Horvath era, because we've talked about it numerous times on this show. The quarterback at Navy holds a lot of the keys to the success of that team. You think about Keenan Reynolds and Ricky Dobbs and Blake Horvath. Is Braxton Woodson going to be the next guy to etch his name on that list? I'm very curious to see.
Yeah. It is interesting because when you look at Brian Newberry's start, it's a little rough, and you wondered, does he get it? There was a lot of talk about they're going to change the offense and they're going to do this different, they're going to do that different. And you're like, yeah, we've been here before. Like, hey, buddy, it's Navy, it's Army. You can't play D1 football and run a traditional offense if you're going to go. I mean, as Air Force has kind of gone away from the stuff they did, they've gotten worse and worse and worse. And that first year, 5-7, and just some you get crushed by Notre Dame, you lose by 4 to Memphis, you lose to South Florida, you lose to Air Force, you lose to Temple by 2 touchdowns, you get blown out by SMU, and then you lose to Army, and your wins are over like East Carolina, who I don't think was very good that year. 2-10. They fired their coach. You beat UAB, who that year went 4-8. So I think it might have been Trent Dilfer's best year. You beat Wagner, who was a 4-7 FCS team. You beat 5-7 North Texas, and you beat 3-9 Charlotte. That was his first year, as they're trying to kind of do this new triple option. And I think it evolved. And it's like, look, it's different. It's versatile. It's these different things, but it's still the option. It's still hard to defend. And I think, but it's like with anything, it's like, no, the system isn't bad like it was in 2023. It's like any other triple option. If you don't have the right quarterback, it doesn't work. And Blake Horvath was the right guy. And I think that Brian Newberry quickly kind of realized, like, look, if you're going to win here, you can't have a defense that plays sound football, like schematically sound. You always need to be sound, but you need to be schematically unique and different. And I think he had to learn that. And he learned quickly. He's a quick learner. There's no question about it. And when you look at their losses the last 2 years, Trev, I mean, they went 10-3 in 2024, and their losses were to Notre Dame, ranked Tulane, and Rice. So the Rice game was bad, but that was with the really banged up and injured Blake Horvath. And then their losses last year were to a really good North Texas team in Notre Dame. So, 21-5 the last 2 years. But now you're in the post-Blake Horvath era. And it's not just him. You lost Alex Tetska. You lost Eli Heidenreich that you mentioned, who was really good. And it was a fun couple years. And so I like the direction they're going, but you can't deny that their quarterback was unique. And now we're going to find out, did they win because Brian Newberry's a really good coach and he had a really good quarterback? Or did the really good quarterback mask the coach? I think it was that they had both. But now we get to find out. because it doesn't mean that Braxton Woodson isn't also a great player, but it's like, okay, but he's a very different type of player. And Drew Cronick's going to have to kind of go at teams differently this year than he did last year. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think Navy enters this year that if they're as good as we think they can be, Trev, they could be a contender for that G5 playoff spot. They really could. Their schedule is set up very nicely for that.
That is. I mean, their schedule's set up nicely for it, and the makeup of the other potential candidates in the G5 are, like I said, a lot have moved on. North Texas has a new outlook. Memphis has a new outlook. USF has a new outlook. James Madison has a new outlook. And so I'm very interested to see what Navy's going to be able to do with that schedule. But I'm with you, man. They're going to absolutely have the opportunity to go and show that they are one of the best teams in the G5. And they've been one of the best teams in the G5 the last couple of seasons. Very interested to see what happens in that post era. But when I look at what their schedule has coming down the pipe, they have the ability to be a 10-win team this year. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just say for argument's sake, and I know we give the prediction at the end of how we think that game is going to play out. Let's chalk up the loss to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to look at how is
I don't think you're giving away any
no
world secrets that we're going to predict Notre Dame to beat Navy. So I'll let that slide, Trev.
Yeah,
you're sharing. That was classified. That was embargoed until the end. No one knew where we were going to go with that.
Spoiled the ending of the segment, Trev.
Everyone's going to check out now. Yeah.
Let's just start ranking the top.
The only reason all these people have been in the chat is because they're just dying to hear. Are they going to beat Navy? Yeah.
When you look at what Navy has on the docket for this season, obviously they have their games against Air Force.
I'm pulling up the schedule now.
And Army. But there's a couple of games in here that I think are going to really indicate how their season is going to go. Now, when you have it's all the more reason to be a premium message board subscriber at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You can see our prediction for the Notre Dame Navy game for sure. When I look at the schedule, obviously there's some constants on here. You get Notre Dame, you get Army, you get Air Force, the other service schools. There's going to be games that make or break their season at the G5 level. Like I talked about, there's a different outlook at Memphis with Ryan Silverfield now at Arkansas. There's a different outlook at North Texas with Eric Morris now at Oklahoma State. So what games are we talking about here? When I look at the game on the road against UTSA a couple weeks before they play Notre Dame, that is going to be a huge either demerit or a huge bonus on their playoff resume and their journey to make it to be the G5 bid. That game, if I'm Navy, I have circled on October 17th. Also the same weekend, Notre Dame plays one of their biggest games of the season. So going to be a big weekend for both of those schools, but that is the game that I would have circled on my calendars on the road against UTSA.
That 3-game stretch right there to me is going to make or break Navy season. You can't afford a slip up of those 2 games. You've got to beat Memphis. Basically, you've got to be 10-1 going into the playoff selection. That's where you've got to be. You got to be 10-1 because if you are, you got a shot to be ranked. You do. Now, the flip side is they don't have any big enough wins to be ranked. Yeah, they're 10-1, but they didn't beat anybody. That's why they need UTSA to be as maybe bounce back and as good as you and I think that they might be able to be this year. And you need North Texas to be good again, even though they lost their coach and the majority of their good players. But you're going to need that UTSA game could be that one that maybe vaults them into the top 25 if the season is as chaotic as we think it's going to be. Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now FanDuel has their over under win total set at 8.5 wins, which when I look at the schedule, those are honestly pretty favorable odds.
Yes.
You take the over, say they're a 9-win team. That means you factor in potential losses to honestly, kind of that 3-game stretch that you talked about, UTSA, North Texas, and Notre Dame. Don't see them dropping to UAB or Florida Atlantic or Towson or UAB or Charlotte. Definitely not Charlotte. So I'll be very interested to see how their season actually pans out. But there is a world where they are a 10-1 team going into the selection committee. Now, the one thing that I'll be interested to see is I believe Selection Sunday is the weekend before the Army-Navy game.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that last year. Do you think that's going to play a factor at all?
I think it depends. I think it depends on whether, because like if Navy's 10-1, they're playing in the AAC championship game. So I think if they win the AAC championship, I think you put them in. Because, if they lose to Army, they lose to Army. Look, but it's got to be they're clear. If they're clearly the best G5 team, then you put them in. But I also would understand if it's close between them and Boise State or San Diego State or Fresno or UNLV or James Madison again or somebody like that, then maybe that team gets the edge because we don't want to put a team into the playoff and then they lose a week before the first round game to Army. But you also shouldn't fault them because of the way the Army-Navy game is set up.
Very true.
So if they're 11-1 in the AAC champs and they're clearly the best G5 team, then you put them in. That's what you need to do. But if it's close and you're back and forth, I'm not sure who's better, them or pick another team like that. Then I could understand the committee saying we're going to err on the side of the team that can't lose the week after the rankings come out. I think that's fair. But you don't drop a clearly better team below because you don't want the black eye, because you're going to have enough black eyes you're going to have some SEC team that has no business being in the playoffs next year, and that'll keep people talking about it.
Yeah.
I hope Navy makes it. I'd love to see a team play that triple option in the playoff. I would flip and love that.
Oh, it'd be awesome. Oh, that'd be so great. I'm with you. And I hope they do it. Let's talk about some of the reasons why we believe that they have a chance and some of the strengths that Navy has going into this season. And you guys know us, it's going to start up front. And not just because we're, offensive line driven people and we believe that success starts up front. Navy has 4 returning starters in the trenches coming back this season. Talked a lot about, new quarterback post Blake Horvath era. Drew Cronick is going to have a lot of experience in the trenches on offense to work with to get this offense going this fall.
The reality is this, Trev, is when you're looking at the triple option, you need a quarterback, you need a fullback, and you need a veteran offensive line to thrive. The fullback is a little easier to find than the quarterback, if we're being honest. A fullback doesn't have to necessarily be a great player. He just has to be able to do his job and grind out tough yards and be able to read the blocking to know when to cut back and things like that. But it doesn't have to be, if they don't have Alexander Teach, if he's not that good, then, they're not going to be good. You just need a fullback that can do the job. And that's important, but it's the quarterback that's really important. If you've got the quarterback and you've got the line, the slot backs don't matter as much. They're just good athletes. They're not they're not the primary ball carriers. So I think that's going to be interesting. It really comes down to, the offensive line and what they can bring to the table. Because if they can bring something to the table, then all of a sudden, now it comes down to the next thing we're going to talk about. The fullback becomes a little less, oh no, we better have a monster fullback if the offensive line is experienced in this system. That's going to be the key. And I think that's something that gives me high expectations for what they're going to do. And honestly, the other thing that gives me high expectations for what I think they can be this year, Trev, is what we saw from Braxton Woodson last year when he did have to come off the bench. And when he came off the bench in 24, he struggled. He did. And so you're like, man, this post Blake Horvath there is going to be tough. But I think some of those struggles he had coming off the bench in 24, I think helped him improve his game. He was very good against Notre Dame. And then he rushed for over 100 yards. Then comes off the bench against South Florida the very next game and goes for over 100 yards in like a half, and just rips South Florida up. Like, okay, this kid's got a little something to him, because South Florida saw film. You could say Notre Dame wasn't prepared. They prepared for Blake Horvath, and he gets yanked last second, and now it's okay, cool. South Florida definitely prepared for him because Blake Horvath was uncertain, and they had just seen him prepare.
One of the things that I think helped too is in 2024, when he was inserted into the game, Drew Cronick was asking him to be Blake Horvath. And I think their offensive coordinator had a better understanding of the skill set that Braxton Woodson has in comparison to what Blake Horvath has. And this past season in 25, we saw him lean more into what makes Braxton Woodson a lethal player. He's the only 100-yard rusher. He was the only individual player that rushed for over 100 yards against Notre Dame's defense last year.
Yeah.
Went for, I think, like 102, I think. Last fall against Notre Dame. Outside of that, nobody.
101.
101. I don't know if anybody got over 90 outside of Braxton Woodson. But
that's a good question.
I'll have to go back and check that if any individual rusher did.
I'm looking at that now. Yeah, I'm gonna look because it would have only been a couple guys. I know that A&M didn't have anybody there, but I'm wondering if Mark Fletcher got close. Mark Fletcher had 66 against Notre Dame. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's Braxton Woodson has the potential to be again, to the point that we made earlier in the show. He could etch his name up there with the Ricky Dobbs and the Keenan Reynolds and players like that. But running behind this offensive line is going to do it a lot of justice. Navy's offense is really driven by the quarterback. I'll be interested to see how Drew Cronick adjusts because he is a different player than what Blake Horvath is. But it's not just going to be up to Braxton Woodson. It's not just going to be up to the offensive line. Navy as a program is just a very disciplined team. That goes back to something that you brought up at the start of the show. Like, was it Blake Horvath that led to their success and kind of masked the true coaching job that Brian Newberry did? Or was Blake Horvath a really good quarterback and Brian Newberry is a really good head coach? Mm-hmm. Them being a disciplined, fundamentally sound, versatile football team is what leads us to believe that Brian Newberry is also a very good coach for this program.
Yeah, agree. Real quick, Trev, just to give you some context on what we were just talking about. The next height, from what I can find, I just went through it. The next best rushing performance of the season last year against Notre Dame was actually Taylon Green with 81 yards. Was the next best performance against Notre Dame. And I'm actually, let me look at something here real quick because this is actually going to be funny if I'm correct on that. No, I'm not. I thought I remember him having a bigger run than that. But yeah, the next best, because if you look at it, Trevor, only 1, 2, 3, 4, only 5 teams rushed for more than 100 yards against Notre Dame as a team. Boise had 100. Miami was 134. A&M was 128. A&M or Arkansas was 158, and 54 of that came on one scramble by the quarterback. And then the next highest was Syracuse at 112 on 50 carries. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 of the teams didn't even get to 80, 90 yards rushing.
As a team.
So, as a team, right. So, yeah, he went for 100 on a team that, if you take away Navy, Notre Dame only gave up something like 80-something yards per game, rushing yards last year. 90. I think it was 90 if you take that away.
That's crazy.
Yep. So, yeah, somebody in the chat just said you'd think Mark Fletcher went for 100 yards the way Miami fans say they dominated. It's such true. Miami acts like they just ran all over Notre Dame last year. They had 134 rushing yards and 3.5 yards per carry. But when Miami did well last year, they got the tough yards when they needed them. That's what Miami did last year. That last drive, they grinded out tough yards on Notre Dame that last drive. But no, they didn't run it all over Notre Dame. But yeah, so that's an interesting point, Trev, that you were getting to. I just wanted to get back to your to kind of what you're saying. But yeah, the Braxton Woodson's legit. And to your point about Coach Newberry, that's something that Coach Niumatalolo had lost his last couple of years. They just weren't as disciplined of a team. They just made a lot. Navy never used to beat themselves, and they started beating themselves and just making mistakes. You're like, dude, that's not Navy. Right. Blowing coverages and just putting the ball on the ground. And I think that's something that I've been impressed by with Brian Newberry. They're a very disciplined, well-coached football team and a mature football team. And I think that's really helped them quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's talk about some of the concerns, however, kind of the flip side of the coin for some of the things that we've talked about. And one of them has just been consistent throughout the show. You have to replace a lot on the offense from a skill standpoint. You lose Blake Horvath, you lose Alex Tedska, you lose Eli Heidenreich, and I believe you lost one of your wide receivers as well. Yeah. You also lost your left guard, Ben Purvis. You lost another halfback in Brandon Chapman. So
and he had been just very productive in his career. He was a really nice complimentary player for them, by the way. Brandon Chapman last year averaged 7.6 yards per carry. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
He was actually, of the starters, he was their best yards per carry guy. The only guy that played at all that was better than him was Braxton Woodson. Yeah, he's a good player.
Yeah, they're going to need some other players. Like, they're going to need Luke Hutchinson on the outside to step up. They're going to need Vic Listorti. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Good luck with that,
Yeah, to step up, and then Charles Robinson and Isaiah Bryant along with Braxton Woodson, because that's it. That's the flip side with Navy's offense. The quarterback can be a major driver, but you also have to be able to have supporting cast around you to step up. I think of some of the other previous Navy teams that have had really great quarterbacks. You mentioned some of the great fullbacks that have came through. I mean, I still remember Alexander Teach just running absolutely buck wild on Notre Dame's defense.
Well, in his defense, Notre Dame didn't know they were going to run the veer.
That's true. I did forget about that piece.
I still can't believe that. That was the first sign, like, this may not go like we think it's going to go. You didn't practice for the veer? What? You had one job. You had one job.
How far they've come, man. How far they've come.
Oh, my goodness.
I will say the losses are also not just subject to the offensive side of the ball. You also lost some pieces on defense. Most naming, you lost defensive tackle Landon Robinson, who got drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. You lose both of your cornerbacks and Justin Ross, who transferred to Virginia, a team that just got done playing for the ACC title. And you also lost Jackson Campbell to graduation. So you did lose some pieces.
They also, I think, didn't they lose Luke Pierce as well? I think he's gone as well. He was a real tall, rangy outside linebacker for them. So, yeah. Yeah. That's going to be an interesting one, Travis, is can they – because I could see if their offense is every bit as good as we think it could be. The offensive line's legit. Braxton Woodson is the next Malcolm Perry. They have plug-and-play slot guys ready to step up. They don't necessarily need a guy like Eli Heidenreich as much as they did last year. They don't, because I don't know that they're going to throw the ball quite as much with Braxton Woodson. We'll see kind of how that develops, but I don't know that that's really his game. As I mentioned, he's more of a Malcolm Perry type guy than he is a Blake Horvath type guy. Where he goes 2 of 3 for 50 yards, 60 yards, that kind of thing is more of his stat line. But he went 3 of 8 against Notre Dame. And he can do that and still dominate a game. But let's just say all the rest is plug and play. Their offense is legit. The problem is they could lose games 42-35, 45-42 if they can't fill those shoes on the defense. That's actually honestly the biggest concern that I have is that, like, I'm concerned about the offense, but it's more of a we don't know. But I actually think they're going to be okay there because some of that's plug and play. Your yards are a byproduct of the system. It's easy to gain 7.6 yards per carry when you're catching pitches and there's nobody to your outside. That's a system thing more than anything else. Defense is where I get a little bit concerned. The losses they had especially the 2 corners, they were solid. They were good players. They were solid players. Now, again, can they play with Notre Dame? No, but that's not. We're not previewing Navy for Notre Dame. We're previewing Navy as a team, and they could handle their business to a degree in their league last year, and that's a big concern that I have, especially losing Landon Robinson. It's not every day that Navy loses a guy to the National Football League on the defensive line. You know what I mean? And he was a heck of a player for the Middies.
Let's dive into our season predictions here for Navy, and I'll get us kicked off. I have them going 9-2 in the regular season, going into the AAC Conference Championship. I'll go ahead and do the honors here, Brian. Don't you worry about it. I have them going 9-2. I have them going 9-2. Going into the AAC Conference Championship game, and then I also have them beating Army. I think Navy's going to position themselves to play and potentially contend for a college football playoff spot this year. Be interested to see how the committee handles that piece. But I have them splitting their 2 big games against UTSA and I believe North Texas in there. I think they go 1-1 in those, and then I also have them losing to Notre Dame, a prediction that we'll give here soon. But Navy, I think Brian Newberry is going to show that he is kind of in that next wave of up-and-coming G5 head coaches, like how Alex Golesh. Now, I don't know if he leaves Navy because I think that's a great fit for him. But now with this new wave of Ryan Silverfield and John Summerall and Alex Golesh, Eric Morris leaving the ranks of the G5, I think a lot more people are going to start talking about Brian Newberry.
Now, I hope he stays. I do.
Me too.
Same with Jeff Monken. I don't want Jeff Monken to leave Army. I want him to stay in Army and keep doing what he's doing at Army. This is the year that Brian Monken gets to prove if this is the new normal at Navy. Or not Brian Monken, excuse me.
Jeff
Monken. This is the year that Brian Newberry I kind of combine those two coaches. This is the year that Brian Newberry gets to prove if this is the new normal at Navy, after some down years at the end of the Coach Niumatalolo era. And I think that they do. I think 9-3 is the floor for this Navy team, partly because I think they're going to be good, and partly because I think the AAC is going through a little bit of a down year, and they don't play some of the AAC teams that I think are going to be at the top. Like they don't play Tulane, they don't play East Carolina, who I think is going to be pretty good. So I think that helps. They don't play South Florida in the regular season. So I've got Navy 10-2 in the regular season, and then losing and then playing in the AAC championship game is where I see them. If I'm wrong, I would actually kind of err on the side of 11-1 than I would 10-2, but it's a fine line. And if the AAC was as good as it was last year, I would have them with a couple more losses, because I think that they did lose some very important pieces, and they may not even be as good as they were last year and still have a same record, to be honest with you, because I think the drop off for the other teams in the league was even greater, and their schedule's not as tough. Where last year, Navy had to play a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit more of a challenging schedule. I wouldn't exactly call it like a gauntlet or anything like that, but it was a little bit more of a challenging schedule last season. And so this year, I don't know that it's going to be quite as challenging for a couple of reasons. Number one is who they don't have on the schedule. But more so, it's about what it returns to the teams they do play. So I think that's kind of a factor. Like the last time they played Tulane, they lost 35-0. They don't play Tulane. They didn't play Tulane last year. So I look at it, Trev. I think not playing Tulane, not playing South Florida, not playing some of those more talented teams in the league, combined with the fact that North Texas's roster got rated, Memphis's roster got rated, and they both lost their coaches, is a big factor. And why I think that Navy will have the same record as last year, but maybe not be quite as good of a team as they were last year.
Let's predict their game with Notre Dame, or I guess more so Notre Dame's game with Navy. Look, I said it throughout the show. I have Notre Dame winning this game. Final score prediction, I have it somewhere around like 49-10-ish, very similar to what it was last year, 49-7, somewhere in that range. It's just Notre Dame respects the rivalry, and I think one of the ways that they do respect this rivalry, in all seriousness, is they play Navy the same way that they would play Miami. They play Navy the same way that they would play BYU. Now, I think that is the utmost level of respect you can show an opponent, and that just kind of causes way for a big victory more times than not when they face off on the field. So I have Notre Dame winning 49-7.
I think Marcus Freeman also learned something about playing Navy in his first year. And what he learned is you can never let your foot off the gas against Navy.
Yep.
And you talk about, Notre Dame, when you look at their matchup in 2022, the first time they played, Notre Dame was crushing Navy at halftime. It was 35-13, and they took their foot off the gas, and Navy was one drive away from – they ended up losing by 3. Navy did. Since that time, Notre Dame has beaten Navy so they won 35-32. Since that time, they've won 42-3, 51-14, and 49-10. And that was probably the worst Navy team that Notre Dame played, is the one that they beat by 3, in my opinion. And I think that's why you see Notre Dame annihilate Navy, because they know, hey, look, you could be up on them big, but as soon as you take your foot off the gas against this team, they can hurt you. And I think it was good that his first game against Navy was that kind of game, because now he knows we've got to go into this game and bury them.
Yep.
And they have. And I think they do again this year. I have Notre Dame winning 56-13. Yep.
I like it. Brian, to take us home here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, it's time to rank the top 10 defensive lines in college football. Now, how we have these ranked is very similar to how we've done all of the other ones. We are projecting over the course of the season. This isn't the top 10 D lines entering the season. We are projecting forward how we believe this season is going to shake out. We evaluated this on a couple of different terms. We looked at the talent, the returning production, the system that they're playing in. A piece for me was how portal heavy are they versus are you using the portal for more, filling holes in the depth? Are you relying completely on the transfer portal? That was a factor for me specifically, but overarching talent, returning production system, things like that. And we're going to do this how we always do it. I'm going to read my 10-6. Brian will read his 10-6, and then we'll break it down, so on and so forth.
I did want to say one thing, though, Trev, is we've talked a lot about this being a bounce back year for the SEC. And I've got a lot of negative things to say about the SEC because of the manner in which their coaches are conducting themselves. It's just foolish. And Sean Davis and I were texting back and forth. Like, outside of John Summerall, I was like, is there a grown-up in the room on SEC Media Days? Like, Josh Heupel clowned himself. Like, just all these crying about Eli Drinkwitz. Oh, it's so tough. Bro, look, your toughest non-conference game last year was Kansas. Sit this one out, bro. Like, come on. It's just, they're a bunch of crybabies. However, take that aside. Take the mental toughness or lack thereof from the majority of coaches. So we're going to just play against each other. Well, that then guarantees that you won't lose to good teams because you've gotten I saw somebody sent me a tweet. M. Stacy on X sent me this DM, and it said somebody put a thing up what the semifinals would look like, or what the national championship or something like that would look like without the SEC. And they just showed the exact same. It showed Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Miami, Indiana. I think this is what the playoffs would have looked like the last 3 years without the SEC. Exactly how it played out. It's like, take your ball, go home. Now that everybody's dominating you, it's just crybaby stuff. However, take away that and just look at the football. Part of the reason I'm so annoyed by all their crying is, guys, your league has a chance to be really good this year. Go prove it on the field. And how many SEC quarterbacks we had in the top 10, and then now how many D lines that we have in the top 10 are two big reasons why I think the SEC has a chance to have a bounce back year. I don't know if they have a national champion in the league. We'll see. But this is a year where they maybe get 5 teams in the playoffs, and it's like, yeah, they deserved 5 teams in the playoffs. Where last year and this is what I don't get. Why are you crying? You got 5 teams in the playoff last year, and you deserved 3 at the most. And even one of those was debatable since they lost their coach. So stop crying and just go play ball, because this is the best SEC that I've seen since 2022, in my opinion. Depth of the league. And so this top 10 D-line breakdown will show that. Because everybody knows we are not SEC homers or biased towards the SEC's got the best player. No, that's not us. We do this fairly and objectively, and there's a lot of Southern influence in our top 10 rankings, Trev. A lot. And that's another reason why I think the SEC will be better this year. So I just wanted to get that out there before we jump into our top 10 and just kind of break it down. But let's kick things off, Trev, with your top 10, beginning with
the number 10 Clemson Tigers. So, apologies, forgot we're going 10-6 and then diving into it. I got excited when I start talking about it already. So, number 10, I have the Clemson Tigers. Number 9, I have the LSU Tigers. Number 8, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. Number 7, I have the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 6, I have the Ole Miss Rebels.
I was really waiting on you to go. Number 8, the Missouri Tigers. Number 7, the Auburn Tigers. I was like, come on, man, you missed a great opportunity there. My 10-6 is number 10, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Number 9, the LSU Tigers. Number 8, Georgia Bulldogs. Number 7, the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And number 6, the Indiana Hoosiers. Let's go with your 5-1, Trev. Or actually, let's talk a little bit about our 6-10. Let's go here. Teams we have in common. We both have Ohio State. We both have LSU. And I believe we both have Georgia in 6-10. So let's talk about them a little bit. Buckeyes, we had a little bit different, Trev. I have Ohio State at 10. You have them at 8. We view them kind of bottom, not a whole lot different. Let's talk about the Buckeyes a little bit. I think at number 1, the reason they're in my top 10 is there's 2 reasons why they're in my top 10. 1, the return of Kenyatta Jackson, who was very good last year. Number 2, Larry Johnson. Like, I'm going to be straight up. This is a pure projection for me, because this is a defensive line that is going to look very different from what it looked like last year. You lost your 2 D tackles. You lost Caden Curry, who was very good. The only really regular that was like a big time player last year that was healthy that returns is Kenyatta Jackson. You brought in John Walker from the portal. You brought in James Smith from the portal. You brought in Kay Rousseau from the portal. You're asking Zion Grady as a sophomore who didn't play a lot as a freshman to step up. You're hoping that Bo Atkinson can kind of get back to being what he was at North. There's a lot of ifs on the D-line at Ohio State. You're hoping that Edric Houston can be healthy and help you out. You're hoping that Jason Moore can step up. You're hoping that maybe Carter Wilder can come in and play. We just did a show on ifs. When you talk about the Ohio State defensive line, there's a lot of ifs. But there is talent, and Larry Johnson has a long track record of getting the most out of his defensive lines, and that's why I had Ohio State there. But that's also why I had him 10 on the verge of being that team, because there's just a lot of questions, and I don't know that the overall talent is as good as it's been, to be honest with you. I don't think that John Walker and James Smith are as good as Caden McDonald and Tyleek Williams and guys like that. I don't think they are, but we'll see. And if they are, Larry Johnson will get that out of them.
It's a big reason why I have Ohio State at number 8, projecting forward. And some of it, full transparency, was just a little bit overcorrection. I hammered Ohio State last year for the hire of Matt Patricia, and then they went out and had the number 1 defense in the country. I think Larry Johnson is one of the best college defensive linemen in the business. I love that Kenyatta Jackson comes back, and I think it would be unfair for me to sit and talk about, I think Keon Keeley's going to break out this year because Alabama basically taught him nothing. And then if I go and in the same vein talk about some of the Alabama transfers that went to Ohio State and James Smith and Quay Rousseau, just like, yeah, but I don't know if they're going to be good there because I'm with you. I don't think their ceiling is as high as Keon Keeley.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, if somebody's going to get it out of him, I think it's going to be Larry Johnson. I didn't think much of Caden Curry last year going into the season, I'm saying.
And he was
I
a
was
dog.
like, well, you lose Jack Sawyer and JTT. Caden Curry's a nice player, and then he has a breakout because I think Larry Johnson got the most out of him.
And Kenyatta Jackson's a good player, but I don't know that he's going to be like a dominant player. And they were really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Absolutely. Yeah. I echo a lot of the same sentiment that you do about the Buckeyes.
Yeah. 10 is a comfortable spot for me. And I think if I'm wrong on them being 10, they'll be a little higher. Let's talk about LSU, Trev. That's the one in the top 10 that we had in the same exact spot. We had LSU number 9. Now, LSU's another interesting one in that they are one of those teams that is being driven by the portal. But I think their portal pickups were very good. And I think there's a couple young players that return that I am kind of projecting to have big jumps. One player is Dominic McKinley, who's an interior guy, 6'5", 295, 300. Hasn't done a whole lot the last couple of years, but I really like him, and I think he's kind of poised for a breakout season. But I like Princewell Umanmielen that they got for Ole Miss. He had over 50 pressures last year. He is one of the most explosive players in all of college football. His first step is unbelievable. Unbelievable. The issue that I have with Princewell when I'm just from an evaluation standpoint is he's a little tight-hipped and he doesn't bend real well. So there's a lot of snaps where he just destroys the tackle, but he can't lean in and get to the quarterback. He'll force the quarterback up, and then he's so fast he chases it from behind. So that's why he has, over 50 pressures last year, but doesn't necessarily have some of the sack numbers that you'd kind of think from a guy with over, you'd think he'd be like around 12 or 13 with over 50 pressures, but
sure.
But he's so disruptive and so explosive and so, you got to account for him. If you don't account for him, he can hurt you. I thought that was a really, really big pickup. And obviously Lane Kiffin knows him well. They got Malik Blockton from Oregon, who's a big, kind of quick interior penetrator type of guy that brings something. Stephylan Green is a solid player from Clemson. He's a good pickup. I don't think that's like a great pickup, but again, he's another short, stout, penetrator. Got Jordan Ross out of Tennessee. What's interesting about their D-line is they got a lot of talent out of the portal, but it's a lot of unproven talent, like guys with potential that got to show something outside of Princewell. And then they landed 2 stud freshmen that I think play right away. I think Deuce Gerald's helps out right away, and I think Lamar Brown plays right away. Lamar Brown's a stud.
Yeah, he's nasty.
Yeah, he's going to help him out right away. Now, how do they use him is a question because, is he a big end? Is he a tackle? I think he's an interior guy, but do they waste time trying to let him be an edge player? We'll see. But I don't really care where they play him. He's a dude, and he's going to help them. So I think this is another projection pick. There's a lot of guys that got to step up and be better than I think they've shown so far outside of Princewell. Princewell's like, dude, do what you did last year. And you're a heck of a player for them. It's the upside, and then it's the incoming freshmen. And I think those freshmen are guys that can play right away. They're Abraham Cisse, Elijah Golden, like Rodney Dunham, like they're those come in right now, and that dude's going to help you out. Like you're going to have him for 3 years, enjoy it, and get the most out of him. That's what Lamar Brown is for me. So I also think one thing I like about this D-line is they have depth. They can throw some waves at you. Even if they don't have a stud outside of Princewell, they're throwing a lot of good players at you, which we've seen at Notre Dame can work. Who was the stud for Notre Dame last year? Like the All-American Colin Simmons or type of elite top 10 David Bailey. Notre Dame didn't have one. But they just threw waves of like 12, 13 just athletes at you. And that's why Notre Dame led the nation in pressures last year for defensive linemen. So I think all those things factor in. That's why I felt comfortable putting LSU in. And if I was going to put them somewhere else on that 9, it'd probably be a touch higher because just the depth and the raw talent is really impressive.
Yeah, I echo a lot of the same sentiment. We had them in the exact same spot at number 9. And it came down to Lamar Brown, Dominic McKinley, and Prince Uman. I'll call him Prince Uman.
Okay.
That's what it came down to for me, because those 3 guys, I think, kind of unlock the overall ceiling of this. But there's going to be some continuity that Lane Kiffin is going to have, and there's going to be continuity that, because I believe the defensive coordinator is back in Baton Rouge with him. So guys like Dominic McKinley, Dylan Carpenter, Sean Washington coming back, and then obviously the players that they recruited, Lamar Brown and Deuce Gerald's coming back as well as a big piece too. Projection forward, but I'm with you. I have LSU at number 9 as well.
Georgia's another one, Trev, that we both have in our top 10. We're 1 spot off in the Bulldogs. I have them 8, you have them 7. Let's talk about Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia's a team, when I look at them, I think they caught a little bit of flack last year because of the overall lack of production. When I was going through, because that is something that we looked at, is what type of returning production do you have? And when I went through and looked at Georgia, one of the biggest talking points for them last year was their lack of ability to get after the quarterback. I mean, when I look at the sacks last year, their top 4 team leaders in sacks were all inside linebackers. I mean, one of their D linemen, Kristen Miller, who's now gone, had 1.5 sacks, and then Gabe Harris, who comes back, kind of like an edge player, he had a sack. Elijah Griffin had 1 sack last year, and Nnamdi Ogboko had 1 sack last year. So when I look at their ability to finish at the quarterback, wasn't great. So then I started looking at the talent and the upside to be able to project forward. I think this is going to be one of those defensive lines that I don't know if they have this is just me, a certified stud. I don't know if there's going to be a Colin Simmons.
There's no Jalen Carter.
Right. No Jalen Carter.
There's no Nolan Smith. Right.
But they can just throw a bunch of, to use like a Notre Dame reference, they can throw a bunch of Gabe Rubios at you. They can throw a bunch of Josh Burnhams at you. They can throw a bunch of Junior Tuialamakas at you. And that's where I have them on this list for me. That's why I have them at number 7. I think Georgia's defense overall is going to be able to step up. I think their secondary, in the conversation of marrying up your coverage, is going to be better this year. So I think that's going to put the defensive line in better position to succeed as well.
Look, Georgia's D-line has never been a big get after the quarterback D-line, but it's been better than it was last year. And that's got to get better. I mean, look, their 2 top sackers in 2024 were inside linebackers. Their top sack guy in 2023 was an inside linebacker. Their top sack guy in 2022, their second title year, was a D lineman with 4.5. And then it was inside linebacker, DB, outside linebacker, then Jalen Carter with 3 sacks. In 2021, their top sacker was an outside linebacker. Their next was Nakobe Dean as an inside linebacker. Third was Trayvon Walker, who only had 6. He was a top 10 draft pick. I think wasn't he a number 1 draft pick? and then Channing Tindall, an inside linebacker with 5.5. They've never been a team that's gotten a lot of sacks. But to Trev's point, it's been more than 1.5. And that's kind of the issue. I mean, you look at their D line, they only had 4 D linemen that even got a sack, 3 D linemen that even got a sack last year. That's got to get a lot better. And that's something that I do think helps them this year, Trev, is I do think they have some guys that either are more prepared to give them more pressure. I think they've got some younger players that are ready to step in. I think Elijah, if we're wrong about they have a star, and we're wrong about that, then it's going to be Elijah Griffin in his second year. And so if he can step up and kind of be the big talent that I think that he is and can be, then he's a guy that could be that. They, like you said, though, but the big thing about Georgia is just they're throwing waves at you. It's just a lot of good football players, and they've got some size. There's nobody that's great. I think this year they're more forceful than they were. I think this is the ceiling for them, though, at 8. I think you had them at, what, 7?
Yeah.
Right? I think that's where we have them is the ceiling for Georgia. I don't know that they can be a lot better than that, but I think they're definitely going to be good run stuffers, eat up space, and I think we will see them make more plays this year. I do. And they're going to need it because you have another year like last year, and it's going to be a problem. And they won't be in the playoffs if they have another year like last year, in my opinion.
I think if I'm correct on this, I think 9 of the 10 teams in our top 10s that we have are the exact same. The only difference we have is you have Texas Tech in at number 7. I have Clemson in at number 10. What about the Red Raiders? Had you put them at number 7? They're the odds-in favorite on FanDuel to win the Big 12 still, despite some of the quarterback issues. Is D-line a reason for confidence down in Lubbock?
Is there over-under? Did that change with is it still 10.5?
Let me look. I know, like, initially it was 11.5.
11.5, that's what I meant. Yeah, because they were tied with Notre Dame. Is it still 11.5 even with the Sorsby stuff? I'm curious about that. Right
now, given the Sorsby stuff, it is now down to 10.5 wins.
Okay. So it dropped off a game. Look, one of the reasons that I'm very high on Texas Tech, Trevor, is the fact that I think that they're going to still be really good on the D-line. Are they going to be as good as last year? I don't know. That's asking a lot, but I think they're still going to be very good. And you say, well, they got a lot of transfers, and this is a team that's shown they can win with rebuilding a D-line through the portal. That's exactly what they did last year. If you look at their best players from last year, they had 4 really good D linemen: David Bailey, Romello Height, AJ Holmes, and Lee Hunter. That was the heart and soul of their D line last year. Well, they were all first-year portal guys. They weren't even second. They were all brand new. And so I think this defense has shown, hey, if we get the right guys, we can rebuild through the portal. So then the question is, okay, cool. Did you get the right guys? That's kind of that next question when you look at Texas Tech is, did they get the right guys? Now, I don't think the talent they got in the portal is quite as good as they did last year. It's kind of like Notre Dame at running back. Is there a David Bailey at Texas Tech? No. Are there really good football players there? Yes. Is there a Jeremiah Love on Notre Dame's roster? No. Are there really good players there? Yes. And that's kind of how I feel about Texas Tech on the D-line. Obviously, they get AJ Holmes back. He was a really good player for them last season. Watched him in the postseason. Like, their D-line played very well against Oregon. They didn't lose because of their defense. I was very impressed with what I saw from them last year. And AJ Holmes is a really good interior player, disruptive, can get after the quarterback. Really just I'm very high on him as a player. I think they can build around him. Trev, we've talked a lot about him coming out of Miami of Ohio, but Adam Trick is a guy that I'm very high on as well. Had a chance to watch him last couple of years. Obviously, Notre Dame faced against him 2 years ago when he was at Miami of Ohio. Last year, though, Trev, he was unbelievable. 67 pressures in a combined 28 hits plus sacks in the quarterback. He had 8 pressures against Wisconsin, 5 hits plus sacks in the quarterback. He had 4 pressures against Rutgers last season. He had 5 against UNLV. It was a pretty good team last year. So it wasn't like he had 13 pressures against Lindenwood and 12 against Akron. he got his pressures against 6 against Toledo, 7 against Northern Illinois. This is a guy that just was disruptive every week. The worst week he had 2 against Ball State. Just twitchy, athletic, 6'4", 250, really good football player. Very high on Adam Trick and what he brings to the table. I think he can absolutely kind of step into that David Bailey role. And no, he's not David Bailey. But again, it's like we talk, is Aeneas Williams going to be Jeremiah Love? No. Is he going to be a really good football player? Absolutely. That's kind of what we talked about. I think he can be that guy. Trey White is a good football player as well. I think he's a guy that I look at coming over from San Diego State that I think is, to me, gives them exactly what they lost in Romello White. And I think maybe Romello Height and maybe even a little bit more consistent. This guy in the last 2 years, Trev, had 93 pressures in the last 2 years at San Diego State. He had 20 hits plus sacks on the quarterback last year. He had 22 hits plus sacks on the quarterback the year before. This guy can get after the quarterback. In the bowl game against North Texas, he had 5 pressures and 2 hits on the quarterback in that game. Like, this guy is a good football player. Had 5 pressures against Cal, 3 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. So again, how do you do it when you go against the Power 4 teams? And he showed me something. This kid is a really good football player. So I think they're going to be every bit as good on the edge. I think they got somebody better than Romello Height, somebody not quite as good as David Bailey, but both really good. I don't think they're going to miss a beat. I really don't. I think this team is going to be an outstanding football team this season. And part of it is because of the front seven. I think their front seven is going to be, if it takes a step back, it's a minor one. It's still, without a doubt, the best D-line in the Big 12, without a doubt. Look, and the other thing, too, is they went to the portal. They got Mateen Ibaragba from Wake Forest, a guy that Notre Dame was looking at. He's a good football player. I think people make a little bit too much out of him, but he's still a good football player. They got Bryce Butler from Washington. They got 3 other depth players in the portal. They've got, they've signed some young quality players coming out of high school. They're another team that can kind of go throw depth at you, and on top of having very good starters. So that's why I'm very high on what Texas Tech is going to be this year. Now, the fact that they got to prove it a little bit is why I'm at 7. It wouldn't shock me if they jump into the top 5. I don't think they can jump up a whole lot higher than that, just because I think other D lines are going to also be really, really good. But I think Texas Tech is still going to be really good. Clemson was a team that I was close with, Trev, but I couldn't quite pull the trigger. What was it about the Tigers that you liked, other than just the fact that their nickname is the Tigers? Because there's a very clear Tiger bias in your rankings.
There is, man. I mean, you should have seen the internal struggle I went back and forth with putting in Missouri and Auburn as well, and Memphis. But when I looked at Clemson, again, with this projecting over the course of the season, I think they're due for a bounce back. I think some of the pieces that they quote-unquote not quote-unquote lost, but players like Khalil Barnes, I believe, was like the safety that transferred, and he was bought out, and that was evident on the sideline. You have players like, Peter Woods and TJ Parker who were gone, and I thought that they had very self-serving seasons.
Peter Woods especially.
Yeah, and I think they're going to reap the benefits of kind of that addition by subtraction. The best Dabo Swinney-led teams that we've seen are really, really, really good on the defensive line. Really good on the defensive line. But it's not just that ideology of why I have them ranked there. I like the talent that they bring back. Vic Burley returns. Jaheim Lawson returns. Will Helt comes back. And Will Helt had a better season last year than TJ Parker. He did. I thought he was their best defensive lineman at times last season. But then I also like that they were willing to go to the portal and pick up pieces for depth. You get London Merritt. You get Marcus Strong. You get CJ Wesley out of the portal as well. So they were able to go and fill needs in the depths. So this is a team that you have 4 starting defensive linemen that are going into year 2 of the Tom Allen defensive system. The best Dabo Swinney-led teams are driven in large part by strong defensive line play. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go out and be Clellan Farrell, Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, and Austin Bryant. But I am saying if Clemson wants to get back in contention for the ACC, they're going to have to be driven by the lines. And I like the outlook of their defensive line this year. I have them at 10 with room to grow.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think it really what it comes down to is maybe I just like some others more, but I don't disagree with anything you said. I think they're going to be pretty good on the edge. He doesn't get talked a lot about, but Jaheim Lawson was their 3rd best pass rusher last year.
Yeah.
And just according to Pro Football Focus, just as far as like pure numbers. But even their grades, I mean, he was third on the team in pressures with 26. The only guys that were higher were TJ Parker and Will Helt, who are probably a couple first-round draft picks. At the very least, Will Helt's going to be a day two. I mean, excuse me, day two, first couple round draft picks. Because didn't TJ Parker go in round 2, or was he late round 1?
I think he was round 2.
But you're talking about a first couple round draft picks there in those two guys. So I think this D line is still going to be pretty good. I just don't know. I wasn't quite ready because I'm not as sure if those transfers are going to have the same kind of impact as what some other teams' transfers are. But I think we see Clemson very similarly. I think that's one of the reasons I think they're going to be a better team than some people think this year, is because I think they're going to be better up front, and they're not going to have as many of those look at me guys. Peter Woods didn't even look the same. Physically did not even look like the same guy last year. Not physically as far as like how he played. I mean, physically you look at him like, that's Peter Woods. Like, this is two different kids. And then he played like a guy that was just getting his NIL money and ready to go to the league. It was very disappointing. I was shocked that somebody took him in the first round.
Yeah.
It just blew my mind.
Guess they were just banking on the raw talent, I guess.
Yeah.
That's where they landed.
But I really like their edges. I think Jaheim Lawson and Will Helt are going to be maybe the best edge duo in the ACC this year, which is saying something, because Miami's going to have a great edge duo. Louisville is going to have a really good edge duo. North Carolina's got a pretty darn good edge duo. There's some good edge duos in the ACC this year, and you could make a case that Clemson's could be as good as any of them, at least in the conversation. So I'm with you. I'm just not quite ready to put them there. They're the first of my jump in. If you're Trev, they're the first of my jump in, which we'll get to in a little bit. All right, Trev, we'll talk about the Indiana Hoosiers in the next group, since you have them in your top 5. Let's get to your top 5. Sorry, jumped the gun a little bit there.
No worries, man. Top 5 going 5-1 for me. I have the Indiana Hoosiers at number 5. I have the Texas Longhorns at number 4. I have the Miami Hurricanes at number 3, Notre Dame at number 2, and the Oregon Ducks number 1.
Let's talk about my top 5, Trev. Number 5, Texas Longhorns. 4, the Ole Miss Rebels. 3, the Miami Hurricanes. 2, Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And number 1, Oregon Ducks. So our top 3 are the same. Yep. We have 4 of the same top 5. Let's talk first about the Indiana Hoosiers, who you had 5, I had 6. We don't see them a whole lot different. Let's talk about them, Trev. The big thing for me is I think Indiana's going to still be very, very good up front. I don't know. I think they actually could be better on the edge than they were even last year. This could, if the edges are as good as you and I think they could be, they might be better up front on the D-line than they were last year. I think there's a chance. It comes down to, is Burnham and the 2 Kansas State kids, are they as good as we think they're going to be? Because if they are, this could be an even better D-line. Not by a ton. They were pretty darn good on D-line last year, but they could, because both of their Tyreek Tucker and Mario Landino both come back. They've got good depth on the inside. It's really going to come down to their portal edge players.
Projecting that forward, that's why Indiana cracked my top 5. I think they got more talented on the edge. Now, are they going to be as good of football players as what Mikhail Kamara was for Indiana last year? That remains to be seen. But there's a reason why you and I were pretty darn bummed that Josh Burnham isn't coming back to Notre Dame in 2026. It's not just because he was a cool guy. He was a good football player, man, a really good football player. I like what Indiana's going to get out of him. Same with Toby Onsonsamni.
Yeah.
And the continuity that they have up the middle of their defense and Tyreek Tucker and Mario Landino. And that defensive lineup, also Chidi, I'm going to butcher his last name, Obiazor.
Yeah, that's why I just say the kids from Kansas State.
Yep. Toby Onsonsamni and Chidi Obiazor. Yeah. But when I look at them,
football players, man.
They are, man, and they give this defensive front the ability to hurt you in multiple different ways. I think they're going to be very stout up the middle, especially when you start factoring in like their linebacking core with Elijah Hardy coming back and Isaiah Jones. But linebackers, different conversation for a different day. I think they're going to be stout up the middle against the run, and I think they're going to showcase the ability to get after the passer, especially with Toby and Josh Burnham.
Yeah. So Toby had an interesting year last year. He was a little banged up. I think he only played 6 games last year. And he had 5 pressures and 2 hits and sacks, 2 sacks in the opener. He had 4 pressures against North Dakota, had 3 against UCF, and then got hurt against Baylor. Year before, in 2024, when he was healthy, he had 30 pressures, 13 hits plus sacks in a quarterback as a sophomore. And he was on pace for that this year again. And then Cheedy last year led Kansas State in pressures with 30 last year. He didn't have a lot of sacks because, I mean, honestly, teams were just able to get the ball out so quickly on their secondary. That was a problem. But he did have 10 hits on the quarterback last season. So he's a good football player. And then, of course, Josh Burnham's per snap production last year was ridiculously good. And, I think Josh was, he only had 19 pressures last season, but he only played 113 pass rush snaps. He had 5 hits plus sacks in the quarterback. So, we talked about that, Trev. If he would have played the same number of snaps that Boubacar played in pass, so I'll just give it to you. So last year, as I mentioned, Josh Burnham had 19 pressures on 119 snaps, 113 pass rush snaps. If he'd had the same number of pass rush snaps that Boubacar Traore had last season, he would have had 49 pressures. Whew. So Josh was a dude last year. It was 113 pass rush snaps. If he would have played the same number of snaps as Boubacar, he would have had a combined 13 hits plus sacks in a quarterback. So, Josh was a dude last year. He was a dude last year. And I think he's going to be a dude and his run stop numbers were very good too. He had 10 on 107 run snaps, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Pretty darn good.
That ain't too bad.
Yep.
One of the differences, like we said, we had a 1, 2, 3 was the same. I had Indiana in my top 5. You had Ole Miss in your top 5. Kind of walk me through, what did you see about the Ole Miss Rebels? Because I know they've been a hot topic of conversation for us here at Irish Breakdown this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of the things that is why Ole Miss has a chance to be better than I think they're going to be, is because I think their D-line is still going to be very good. Cam Franklin was a very disruptive player last year for them. Will Eccles was a very good player for them last year. So, yes, they lose Princewell, and that's a loss. So not even going to pretend it's not. He had 51 pressures last year, 16 hits plus sacks in a quarterback. But Cam Franklin had 48, and he's a big old joker. I mean, he did that at, I think he's like, let me look at it, 6'6". I think he's like 6'4", 300 pounds, 6'5", 300 pounds. Big old joker, can play on the edge, can play inside. Will Eccles is an interior player. Really like what he brings to the table. 6'3", 315, Trev. And he had 39 pressures last year. But here's what I think separates this for you and I. And here's why, and you tell me if I'm wrong. Yes, losing Princewell was certainly a loss. They get the guys back that they got back. But here's a couple things that I like about what Oregon did. Number one, they went out and got really good depth players in the portal. So they're going to be able to throw some waves at you. But number two, I count Suntarine Perkins as an edge. When you look at how they use him, he'll play some off ball. But he's basically on the line of scrimmage almost the entire game. And he's 6'2", 220. So, no, he's not a guy that's out there like you don't think of him as that kind of player. But he had 31 pressures last year, and he's also back. And if you look at Pro Football Focus, they will talk about like where a guy lines up. They have D-line, box, free safety, slot, corner, A-gap, B-gap, over the tackle, outside the tackle. And if you look at his snaps last year, he played a total of 760 snaps. 648 are what Pro Football Focus counted as on the D-line. He had 69 in the box, which is what a linebacker would do. And then he had 39 in the slot. So you can talk about all you want about he's a linebacker and he's 6'2" and he's 220, but they use him like they basically use him full-time like Notre Dame uses Kingston Villiam-Moss on nickel. Whereas you look at Drake Bowen, for example, who actually is an off-ball linebacker, and Drake last year played 585 snaps, 490 were in the box. Let's compare that to Kingston, because I think that's probably a closer comparison, but I wanted to give you a difference between the two. Kingston played 435 snaps last year. 151 were on the D-line, but 240 were in the box. You see what I'm saying? So,
yep.
Kingston was that variation. He played some on the D-line and nickel, but then he was also an off-ball linebacker. Suntarine Perkins last year, according to PFF, played 69 snaps in the box and 648 on the defensive line. He's a lineman. He's an edge, I should say. So when I count him, that's what changes the thing for me. If I counted him as a linebacker, which I think you did, just because the position – you correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. I just assumed from past conversations. Then I probably would have him a little lower where you have him. But even then, they're still very good. Just because Eccles and Cam Franklin coming back, plus the transfers they got, Renaud they got Jaheim Otis, who at least gives them kind of a big body in the depth chart. He's never lived up to the preseason hype, but they're going to be able to throw some waves at you. And they're going to have the same defensive staff basically as last year as well. So there'll be more continuity on defense than there was on offense when we talk about the offense taking a step back. That's where I was with Ole Miss, Trev. And so if you need to correct the record, if I quoted you incorrectly, then you can correct me now, please.
Yes, it was blasphemous. No, it was, look, man, the thing that kept them just right knocking on the door of my top 5, but not quite yet in it, was partially how I feel about Indiana's offensive line. But the other part of it too is I didn't know, it's kind of like which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Like, was Suntarine Perkins and like Cam Franklin that productive last season because of the presence of Princewell, or was it just they're really good players? I think the truth is somewhere in between. That's where I'm at with them. I think that loss was pretty big. I put a lot of weight into that, but that also doesn't discredit how I feel about what the overall ceiling of this group is. They're at 6 right now for me. They easily could crack into the top 5. That's why, like, you having them at 4, I'm not like, that's insane. It's a 2-spot difference. You know what I mean? But that's mostly where it was at for me. I looked at the PFF numbers. Suntarine Perkins was exceptionally productive last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's just who kind of steps into that, like, will he be the next Princewell for them? Like,
Sure.
Is it going to be Cam Franklin who steps up? That's what prevented them ultimately from being out of the top 5.
Fair. Let's talk about the Longhorns, because I think we have them a little lower than a lot of people. And look, I think Texas is going to be a very good defensive line. There's really 2 reasons why they're not as high as we have them for others. Number one is I think some of these other D lines are better than what people think that they are. And I think the other part is I still have a lot to learn about the Texas up the middle.
Yeah.
But Colin Simmons is a dude. He's an absolute dude. There's no questions. There's no, he gets a lot of hype, but nope, he's a dude. Like, right now, I think I would argue he's the best defensive end in all of college football right now. At least I expect him to be the best defensive end in college football. I mean, just look at the numbers last year, Trev. 13 games last year, 59 pressures, 24 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. 24. And, he did that in some big moments. He had 7 pressures against A&M. He had 4 pressures plus a hit and a sack against Georgia, 8 pressures against Vanderbilt. He only had 2 pressures against Ohio State, but they both resulted in hits on the quarterback. And Ohio State had a game plan saying, we need to make sure that number 1 does not take over this game. And he still got a couple pressures. Michigan had a tough time blocking him. Oklahoma, he had 3 hits plus sacks on the quarterback against Oklahoma. 5 pressures against Florida. So they didn't lose that game because of him. And he also had 33 run stops last year. So he's not a one-trick pony. He is an absolute dude. Opposite him, I think Lance Jackson will be a good player. I do. But there's some growth there that's needed. He's kind of like in that Bryce Young territory that he's shown some flashes, but he's got to step up. But he hasn't produced even the way that Bryce has produced, to be honest with you. But I think he will. Talent is really good. They've got really good depth at defensive end. They're not just those 2 guys. They've recruited the position well. Zena Emezulu is a good player. They brought in 2 freshmen, including 5-star Richard Wesley. Colton Vasek comes back. There's a lot of depth there. My question mark about what separates them from being 5 versus 2 or 1 is really I'm not as sold on the interior. It's good, but I don't know if it's number 1, 2, or 3 D-line in the country. That's where I'm Hero Canu's a good player. Is he a great player? We watch Ian Jeffrard. He's a good player, but we also watched Notre Dame's undersized guards push him around a little bit last year. You know what I mean? Alex January is a good player. Murad Watson's a good player. Justice Terry's a really talented young player. Zion Williams is a good redshirt. So like there's dudes there, and I think year 2 of those guys being on the team should help them. But I think they're more like what Notre Dame's D-tackle rotation was last year than what maybe Notre Dame's D-tackle rotation is this year. I think they're deeper than Miami at D-tackle, but there's a big difference between Miami's 2 starters and Texas's 2 starters. Like those type of things are what separate it for me. And I put a lot more on being good on the inside than I even do on the outside if you're talking about ranking the top D-lines. You can have 2 great edge players, but if you're not good up the middle, they're just going to stay inside of those edge players all day. And that's why Texas is, again, very good D-line, but that's what drops them just a little bit compared to how a lot of other people view Texas.
We view that the exact same. You have them at 5. I have them at number 4. I have to project, in my eyes, the most with the interior of Texas's D-line opposed to any of the other top 5 defensive lines that I have. I have to project their defensive tackles more than I have to with Indiana, Miami, Notre Dame, and Oregon. Notre Dame, we can have a conversation because, I mean, we've talked about it on the show before. Jason Onye has to put it together for an entire season. Armel Mukam has to break out. What do you get from Tion Gray and Francis Brew? But I have to project more with, I mean, Ian Gefford is a good football player. I agree with you, but he has to show me that he's not just a novelty to look at on a depth chart. Right, like, dude, he's 380 pounds. And it's like, okay, well, is he like Florida one time had a defensive tackle that was 421 pounds.
Right.
Like, what does that mean? Like, you know, Murad Watson, is he going to be able to break out this upcoming season? Because he transferred in at the start of last year. I do like Hero Kanu coming back, but that's what kept Texas out of the top 3 for me, is along the same lines of what you talked about. I have to project the most forward about their interior.
No, part of this could be I just watched him against Notre Dame get worked, and he wasn't. And I watched him against A&M, and he wasn't very good. And so part of this could be that I only watched him play a couple times last year, actually 3. Also some against Texas, and he wasn't very good. He was just kind of okay. So I'm just not like, oh my gosh, they got this other SEC player. And since the SEC has all the best players, that means okay.
Sure.
But I still think it's going to be a pretty darn good defensive line. And I think Will Muschamp's style of play is more geared towards letting the D-line kind of play to their potential a little bit more. I thought they were a little too conservative at times with their front, outside of Colin Simmons. Somebody in the chat said that Texas asked that Colin Simmons has to do a lot of heavy lifting for Texas. I don't disagree with that at all. My point is, however, I don't think that's going to be the case this year in the new system. And that's where I'm projecting it to be a better D-line this year. Let's talk about 3-2-1. Let's talk about the number 3 team, the Miami Hurricanes, because now the Miami fans in the chat think they should be number 1 or number 2. Okay, whatever. Let's talk realistically about why, because outside of it, some people rank Miami high. I think Phil Steele had Miami outside the top 10 in his ranking, which
that's a bit.
Yeah, let me pull it up here real quick. Yeah, he had Miami number. No, he had 5. Had him 5. I'm sorry, I saw somebody had him outside top 10. He had him 5. But you lost 2 first-round draft picks in Ruben Bain and Akeem Misador. You lost David Blay, who was a key part of your D tackle rotation. So there's some personnel losses from last year, but they've got their 2 best D tackles coming back. Might be one of the top 3 or 4 D tackle tandems in all of college football. You got Damon Wilson coming in from Missouri, who's a really good pass rusher. And then you've got some other guys. You got Armando Blunt. You got Marquise Lightfoot. You got Keanu Davis from Wisconsin out of the portal, who's a bit of a jack of all trades. D lineman, can play on the edge, can play inside. I think Miami's starting D-line is going to be really good this year. It's going to be different, though. They were power last year. You got power there, power there, power there, power there. This year, you got power up the middle with that, but now you're going to be a little bit more about explosiveness, athleticism, speed off the edge. So it's going to look different this year, but I expect it to still be very good. The only knock I have on Miami and what separates them really from the first 2 teams is I don't think their depth is quite as good as some of those other teams. And I think the edge that Miami fans are all excited about has to show me that he can actually play the run and not just be a pass rusher. That's my big knock on Damon Wilson. He's a really good edge rusher. But in the Miami system, they're going to need him to improve as a run defender. Now, if he takes to the coaching in Miami, I think his game is going to grow. And he's going to become that really good dual threat player. But those are when you're separating really good D lines, you got to find those little separators. And that's what kind of kept it for Miami. That's what kept them from being not there. But you can make a case that if Justin Scott can be consistent this year, they might have the best D tackle tandem in all of college football.
Sure.
Because Ahmed Moten is a dude.
Yeah, he's
D
nasty.
tackle.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. Well, I'm with you completely, man. When I look at Miami, you and I have very similar concerns. If we were only talking about the starting defensive line, you could absolutely debate Miami being number one overall, and I'd be sympathetic to that. Number two.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Miami fans, you guys are really good in the chat, except when we talk about Miami. Then you get real butthurt if we don't say Miami's number one at everything. Okay, Trev, did I say that Miami doesn't have good depth? Did I say that? No, I said their depth is not as good as the other two teams. It's a very big thing. So if you're going to be in the chat and we're going to have a conversation about your team, which we appreciate, and you can make the case for Miami to be higher. You could. There's an argument to make. But as I've said a million times, the one thing that pisses me off more than anything else is when you push back on something we never said. So don't be petty. Don't give me this, oh, they don't count as depth. We never said they don't have good depth. We said it's just not as good as number one and number two. We have them as the number 3 D line in the country, despite losing 2 first-round draft picks, and y'all acting like we said they're not a top 10 D line. Like, y'all are rational until we talk about your team, and then you stop being rational. Focus on what we're saying. Focus on what we're saying. We have Miami as the number 3 D line in all of college football. And we're both there. We think there's separation between 1, 2, and 3 in the next couple. So, like, let's have a conversation. We said there's an argument to be made for them to be higher. So if you're going to push back on us, push back. You can talk about Hayden Lowe being a very talented player. He is. But he's an unproven, very talented young player. He's going to have to kind of show us a little something. He's a talented guy. That's partly why we have him there. Armando Blunt is a good football player. But last year you had those 3 guys plus Reuben Bain and Akeem Messidor. So again, you don't have the same depth you had last year. It isn't. And that's okay. We didn't say they suck. It's just when you're separating 1, 2, and 3, that is something that you look at. Okay, if I'm ranking them here, we just got done saying they have arguably the best D-tackle and tandem in all of college football. And you're mad because we don't think their depth is as good as Notre Dame and Oregon's. It's like, come on, guys. You got to be better than that. You got to be better than that. You just do. And, if we're going to have these conversations, so disagree with us all you want. That's cool. That's part of the fun of these conversations. But you got to at least respond to what we say. That's I don't think that's asking too much. So anyway, let's continue, Trev.
It's also the depth pieces across the board.
Right.
It's not just who do you have at defensive end. This is a D-line conversation. And if you would just hold your horses for just a little bit and not freak out, we were also about to give reasons of what Miami can do to move up this list.
Correct.
You just had to be patient, and that's all it was. No, Miami is not number 1 right now. You see it clearly on the screen. There's a 3 next to their name. And yes, I'm sorry. I don't talk about Armando Blunt being a 5-star when he's about to be a junior. In the same way that I don't talk about Bryce Young being a 5-star by on 3 because he's about to be a junior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you just hold your horses for a little bit, we were getting ready to say, if Keona Davis and Jarquez Carter, at least what I was about to say, I don't want to speak for Brian, but if those 2 guys can round out the depth at defensive tackle, my outlook of Miami's depth starts to change a little bit because I do have questions about Notre Dame's interior. I think it is a deeper unit overall compared to Miami's right now today.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're talking about Armando Blunt in the 2 deep being this 5-star guy, whereas the 5-star recruit for Notre Dame that's in that conversation is the 3rd guy behind a Keon Keeley, who is also a 5-star guy. So we can have
Thank you. Okay, can we go there real quick? If you want to say, we got 5 stars. Okay, Rodney Dunham, 5-star. Keon Keeley, 5-star. Bryce Young, 5-star. Who cares? Your response can be, well, Keon Keeley hasn't played like a 5-star yet. Well, neither is Hayden Lowe. Neither is Armando Blunt. So, yeah, Notre Dame's got some 5-stars, but we don't act like it because they haven't played like 5-stars yet, but they've still been good football players. Armando Blunt, good football player. He had the same numbers that Bryce Young had last year on way more snaps. So, I wanted to just talk about Miami and what we like about them, and instead the Miami guys lose their minds in the chat and act like we said something we didn't say. Let's just screw it. You know what? Let's talk about the next 2. I'm done talking about Miami.
I'm with you. Let's talk about
guys. Miami's the number one D-line, linebacking core, secondary, quarterback, backfield, receiving core, offensive line in the country. Okay, so now that we've established that Miami's number one, we can go on to talking about grown-up stuff. So let's get to the fake number two and number one.
Roll credits. Yeah, let's talk about number two. Let's talk about number two, and that's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And we've already started talking a lot about what they bring to the table. And we're talking about the depth pieces here. Using our lads as a reference, I still have Christopher Burgess as a defensive end, different conversation for a different day. But I love what they have across the board in the trenches. Yeah, Boubacar and Bryce coming back. You bring back, I mean, we talked on the show before about how quickly the outlook of the interior of the defensive line looked. I mean, at one point in time in January, your most experienced returning defensive tackle was Elijah Hughes.
It changed real fast.
And you didn't have a position coach. And then within a span of 2 weeks, you go and get Charlie Partridge. Jason Onye gets granted a new year of eligibility. Armel Mukum withdraws his name from the portal. Tion Gray and Francis Brew hop into the portal. Christopher Burgess makes the move inside. Then the outlook completely changes. And you still have Elijah Hughes and Sean Sevillano and Davian Dixon, all players that have to continue making that jump because they're not ready to be. There's a reason why they're not number one. Yep. There is. And so there's steps that everybody has to be able to make. And you could argue that, there's another level for Oregon's defensive line to make. I think that they're the clear-cut number one defensive line in college football right now, but they're going to be in contention with Notre Dame and Miami and Ole Miss, Texas, IU teams. They're going to have to be able to fend off those teams. But Notre Dame, as of right now, because I've seen some of the pushback in the chat, not from the Miami people, but about does Notre Dame have that bona fide stud guy? Do they have the Colin Simmons? Do they have the Clev Lubin? Do they have the McCard Abujade at North Carolina? Do they have Dylan Stewart at South Carolina? And my answer is not yet. But they have a long list of players that are able to step into that limelight, and that's where I'm at with Notre Dame. That's why I have them number two.
Do they have that star player today? No, I don't think that they do yet, but I think that they will. And I think that Boubacar Traore last year was close to that. When you look at the production he had last year, Armando Blunt, the guy that in the chat everybody's kind of losing their mind about. Armando Blunt was primarily a pass rusher last year. He had 30 pressures on 13 hits plus sacks and a quarterback on 304 pass rush snaps. And he played, I think he played in every game last year. He might have missed one. Boubacar Traore returns. He had 31 pressures last year, 16 hits plus sacks and a quarterback, and only played 11 games last season. So certainly the production there. Armando Blunt last year had 7 run stops last year. He was a one-trick pony because that's how they used him. I think he'll be better as an all-around player this year in the rotation, but Boubacar had 26. You look at Damon Wilson last year, 54 pressures is very impressive. He had 17 hits plus sacks and a quarterback. He had one more hit plus sack and a quarterback than Boubacar did, despite playing, I think it was about 26 more pass rush snaps. He had 12 run stops last year. 12. 3 of them were against Louisiana and Lafayette. 2 of them were against Central Arkansas. So, again, he's a one-trick pony. Whereas when you look at Notre Dame and you look at Boubacar, he was a strong all-around defender last year. And now it's about, look at Bryce Young. Bryce had 29 pressures, one more than Armando Blunt, on over 100 fewer pass rush snaps last season. Bryce had 11 hits plus sacks and a quarterback. If you give Bryce the same number of same number of snaps, pass rush snaps as Armando Blunt, who had 13 hits plus sacks and a quarterback, Bryce would have 17 hits plus sacks and a quarterback. If you give him the same number of pass rush snaps as what Damon Wilson had last year, he would have times 319. He would have 17 hits plus sacks and a quarterback, the same exact number as Damon Wilson. But when it's not just about rushing the quarterback, Bryce had 10 run stops last year on 104 run snap plays. That's 2 fewer than what Damon Wilson had on 82 fewer snaps than what Damon Wilson played last season. And that was his true sophomore season. So again, when you look at the production, you can look at raw numbers, which is fine. But if you don't also have the context of how many snaps they played or how many games they played, then you kind of miss a little something. So when you look at the idea that Notre Dame has a pretty strong duo coming back on the D-line, then you see Keon Keeley. He's a bit of a wild card for me, Trev. Keon had 3 sacks, which is impressive, but Keon didn't have a lot of production outside of that. So when you look at what can make Notre Dame stay at 2 and either jump up to 1 or stay at 2 or maybe at 2 and fall down, and maybe they're not as good as we project, a lot of it's going to be about the depth at defensive end because there's a lot of talent there, but it hasn't proven itself. Now, the difference between Notre Dame and Miami is Notre Dame has a depth mark question at end, just like Miami does, because if you're gonna try to tell us that Miami's depth is strong because they have Hayden Lowe, who played, I believe, 0 snaps last season, I think he was injured, then he's played as much as Rodney Dunham has, and he's played less than what Keon Keeley has. So then you throw in Keon Keeley, or Rodney Dunham was a 5-star recruit. You throw in Ebenezer Utade, who was a top 40 national recruit last season as well. There's a lot of talent there, but there's a lot of guys that have to step up and show that they can be ready to play now. That's something we've talked about all offseason. The depth at DN is a legitimate concern for Notre Dame, just like I think depth at D tackle is a concern for Miami. That is not where Notre Dame has any problems. Notre Dame has 8 or 9 D tackles that can play in the rotation this year. And like you said, it went from dark to really good in 2 weeks.
Man.
Armel Mukam comes back out of the portal. Jason Onye comes back. Jason Onye had the same per snap production as Riley Mills during his All-American year in the last 6 games of the year. Last season. Best game of the year was probably USC.
Yeah.
He started the season off playing better than Riley Mills and Howard Cross in 2024 before he had to leave the team. So he's there. You've got Elijah Hughes back, who's part of your rotation last year. You've got Francis Brew showing up. You got Tion Gray showing up. You have, I mentioned Armo Mukam, and then you've got, some young players that are unproven like Cole Mullins and Sean Sevillano. Those are like number 6, 7, 8, 9 for Notre Dame. And then you've got Elijah Golden coming in as a freshman who is going to have a hard time seeing the field. So you talk about being able to throw waves at people. That's what Notre Dame does at D tackle. And as we've said, D tackle depth to me is more important than defensive end depth is to me. But the question is, can Notre Dame sustain the injuries on the edge like they've done the last couple of years? That's the big question mark that they're going to have to answer, because there isn't Junior Chilamaka, Josh Burnham, Jordan Patelho, guys like that coming off the bench that are proven veteran players. But they weren't proven in 2024. Just like Keon's not proven, just like Rodney Dunham's not proven. So I think that's kind of, when I look at it, Trev, it's the depth at D tackle. And by the way, do you know what team led the nation according to Pro Football Focus in D-line, the amount of pressures from the defensive line last season? You know what team was number 1 in college football in D-line pressures according to Pro Football Focus?
I do.
Is Notre Dame. So it doesn't take a whole lot of jump to see that this was a very productive line. Most of their top players are back. They had one guy get drafted in the 6th round. And basically everybody else that was an impact player last year is back, except for Josh Burnham, who left to Indiana.
Yep.
And part of the reason he left is because he wasn't playing as much because of how deep they were at the position last year. So that's what gives Notre Dame number 2. I do think, if you're being fair, if Keon doesn't step up and if Jason Onye can't be a consistent player, I do think teams like Miami, if they can answer some of their questions, Texas, if they can answer some of their questions, Indiana, if they can establish some depth on the inside, which is a concern for me. There are some teams that can pass Notre Dame up if that doesn't happen. So this isn't like they're number 2 and they got that locked down. It's who's next. I think it's fair to say they're number 2 based on talent, depth of talent, proven production, and just being able to play in a system that's going to allow them to attack the quarterback. And now you've got a D-line coach that I think can take this thing to another level. So, and they're going to be going against a very good O-line every day in practice, which I think helps as well. So it's an easy projection, and it's not just us. Athlon has Notre Dame's defensive line ranked number 2. I think Phil Steele had them ranked number 2 as well. Let me find the Phil Steele rankings. He had them number 2 as well. Yes, he had him number. No, he had him number. No, that's defensive backs. He had him number 3. behind Ohio State and Oregon, Texas 4. No, I'm sorry, 5. You had Ohio State 1, Oregon 2, Oklahoma 3, Texas 4, Notre Dame 5, Miami 6, Michigan 7. Michigan was not in the conversation for me because I don't think John Daly Henry's healthy. That's part of the reason Notre Dame didn't take him. I think David Pollock had him 4. I think Greg McElroy had him 3. Yeah. So they're a consensus top 5 D-line. It's just about where they fit in there. And so we have them at 2, but it is a tenuous hold on 2. And I think there are arguments that can be made for Miami, for Ole Miss, for Texas, and even Indiana as far as being ahead of Notre Dame. But it's the depth of talent plus the projection of Bryce and Boubacar going into their second full seasons that, to me, and then what we saw from Keon late in the season that projects this forward to me for Notre Dame.
Let's talk about our number 1 team, Brian, and that's the Oregon Ducks. Been up on the screen here for a little bit of time, but it makes sense. They bring back all 4 returning starters from last year. From left to right, they bring back Mateo Uiagalelei, Bear Alexander, Amari Washington, and Tatum Tuioti. They lost important depth pieces to the portal, including one in Tion Gray, who is now in South Bend. But they made some good portal pickups, and they still bring back guys like Nasir Wyatt. Elijah Rushing comes back. They picked
very
up
talented younger players. Yeah,
absolutely.
Aiden
One's a
Breland,
redshirt sophomore. Yep. One's just a normal sophomore. They bring in DeAndre Robinson in the transfer portal, so that they're still going to be a very, very talented defensive line. No doubt about it in the depth.
What I like that Oregon did, Trev, is they lost depth and they replaced depth, meaning they didn't go out there and like overspend on some big name guy. They went out and got good depth players, former starters from other places or good rotation players from other places, but not guys that were necessarily like go out there and get the kid from Wake Forest that's going to cost you a couple $1 million. I think that was smart. I like how Oregon built the roster. Get guys that are going to be okay coming off the bench because clearly guys they had last year weren't. This is just the best starting 4, first of all, in college football. You bring back your 4 from last year. The big question mark for me, this was the one that was the easiest for me as far as ranking the top 5. This is the one I spent the least amount of time really wondering about because there's so much more proven aspects of what they do up front. You look at Mateo, you look at TT off of the edge, Tatum. Amari Washington is a dog in the inside. What to me is going to determine whether or not but then they lost Blake Purchase, Terrence Green, Ashton Porter, Tion Gray, Jericho Johnson were all good football players that other teams are now counting on to be really good football players.
Yeah.
These are really good football players. But like you said, Elijah Rushing comes back. You get Nasir Wyatt was really good as a true freshman off the bench last year. He's going to be a stud at Oregon at some point in time down the road. He's a guy he is what Miami fans are talking about Hayden Lowe, except that he's shown it. He's actually played last season and showed off that talent a little bit. But then Bear Alexander to me though is what's going to determine whether they stay here or not. If Bear Alexander can do what he did last year, he was a pretty good football player. He wasn't great, but he was a good, consistent football player. Then I think they stay number 1. If he doesn't, then I think there's a chance that a Notre Dame, a Miami, a Texas, if their questions are answered, can step up. Because here's the thing about Oregon. They're the clear number 1 for me right now, but I think they're as good as they're going to be. I don't think there's another level for their D-line to get to. They're just the best of what we know. I think teams behind them, Notre Dame, Miami, Texas, maybe Indiana, even Ohio State and LSU down at 9 and 10. There's way more room for those teams to make big jumps because there's so many things we're wondering, hey, what will they be?
Yeah.
Even going to number 10 Ohio State, how good is Zion Grady going to be? Can Bo Atkinson be the 24 North Carolina version? Do the Alabama kids play like the 5 stars they were in high school? Is John Walker the pickup that Ohio State hopes he's going to be? You got all those question marks where they may not get there, but there's room for growth. Same thing with LSU, which we talked about. Same thing with, I think Georgia's kind of at their ceiling, but Texas Tech, could they jump in to be as good as they were last year and be in the top 3? So there's a lot of teams that still have things that they can show. Notre Dame, even at 2, there's a lot of if this happens, if that happens, because we don't think guys have peaked. When I look at Oregon, I'm like, this is just what they are. They're outstanding, but I think they kind of are what they are. That's where I'm at with them. So, but they're also the most proven, means that is why I have them at number 1 right now. Just, I really like how this unit is built. I do. Now, here's the question mark, though. Can they play well in the bigger games? That's my big question about the Oregon D-line. But that's my question about the entire Oregon team.
Yeah, agreed.
Can they play well in the big games? They weren't great in the playoffs last year, at least not in the last game they played.
Oh yeah, I mean, you go through our entire top 10 list, and I have one overarching question for every single one of them. For Oregon, it's can you play better in big games? Notre Dame, can you do it on a more consistent basis? Miami, can you supplement the losses of 2 first-round NFL edge rushers? For Ole Miss, it's what are you like in the post Lane Kiffin / post Princewell era? For Texas, can you be more physical at the? So I'm with you. The list goes on and on. I also agree that this is Oregon's spot to lose. But I mean, when we're talking about it seems like this is who you are, and you're sitting at the number 1 spot on a ranking, that's a pretty good D-line.
But did that make sense? Like,
absolutely.
They're clearly number 1 because of what they've done, but it's like they're not going to get better. They just are what they are.
Right.
Whereas other teams have a chance to maybe surpass them, but they'd have to have a lot of things go their way.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
I'm with you. As we wrap this up, Brian, let's kind of talk about some superlatives here. And we're talking about sleepers, who on our ranking could rise up the most, who's at risk of dropping out, and then who do we see jumping in? So, Brian, who do you have as an overall sleeper?
I got 2. I got 2, Trev. Number 1 is USC. And I've seen some rank them as a top 10 team. Not many. It's absurd to put them in the top 10 right now because it's off pure projection. Having said that, they have a shot. I think when you look at it, you had Jakeem Stewart last year as a 5-star kid that came in and he reclassified. And I think he kind of struggled to kind of get going. I don't know that they knew how to use him. You look at their team, they lost Devin Tompkins from their D-line. You lost, I'm trying to remember his name, Anthony. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. The kid that Notre Dame wanted coming out of high school. I can't believe that I'm forgetting this trip. Anthony Lucas. He had the best year of his career last season. Devin Tompkins transferred out. What did he go to Alabama? Right. But you still have a lot coming back. You've got Braylon Shelby coming back. He led them in pressures last year. Cameron Crawford comes back. G.D. Abasiri comes back. So there's some good players coming back. Jakeem Stewart is going into what should be his freshman year. He kind of did for them on defense what Notre Dame's kind of did with Teddy Gerard this past year is reclassifying up. And then they went into the portal and they got some good pickups out of the portal as well. Not the game changers, but Zariah Fishers is a good player out of Penn State. They got Alex Van Sumeren from Michigan State, who is a quality depth player that they got from Michigan State. So there's some good guys there. Jamal Jarrett they got. So I like this roster, Trev. I think putting them in the top 10 right now is just not something I'm comfortable with because they weren't a very good D-line last year. It's pure projection, where with some of these teams that we're projecting like Texas and Notre Dame and some of these teams, we're projecting what was already a good D-line to be even better. They were not a very good D-line that you're projecting to be a top 10 D-line. I can't go there. But they're enough talent to where I got my eye on them. That's one of my 2 sleepers. I'll give you my other one after. I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, my sleeper is the Louisville Cardinals. Yeah, dude, he is nasty. I mean, look, I find myself while we do these rankings, I always find myself talking about Louisville, which I think all signs are pointing into the direction that this needs to be a better season for Jeff Brom to be able to put it all together. Different conversation for a different day. But I like what Louisville brings back, man. I mean, they bring back Clev Lubin, who led the team last year, 64 total pressures, 25 hits plus sacks on the quarterback in 13 games. They also bring back A.J. Green, opposite of him, 38 total pressures last year, 8 total hits plus sacks on the quarterback. And then they went to the portal and they supplemented losses along the interior. They brought in Dalen Russell, who comes over from Miami. And if we know anything about them, every player that they have is awesome. And then they also bring in D'Amico Kennedy. Exactly.
Even their backups that transfer out are going to go be the best player in the country at the team that they play for.
And then they bring in D'Amico Kennedy, who Notre Dame faced last year when he was at Purdue. So I couldn't put them in because I have questions about their depth. They brought in Tyler Thompson from the transfer portal. He transferred in from North Carolina to back up Clev Lubin. They also got Joshua Donald and then Gerard Smith. So they're a very portal heavy team, which always makes me a little bit nervous in the trenches. But that's just kind of what Jeff Brom has been doing. That's kind of his DNA at Louisville. But they have a sneaky good, like they have the opportunity. They are one of the teams that are in contention with Clemson, with Miami, honestly, with North Carolina, if somebody can step up alongside Makard Abujade, to have one of the best edge duos in the ACC. So Louisville's my sleeper.
Here's my sleeper, and y'all are not going to be prepared for this one, so brace yourselves. My sleeper team is the Maryland Terrapins.
Oh,
their defense stunk last year, and their D-line was not very good last year from any kind of consistency standpoint, but it was very flashy because they were very, very young. They had 2 true freshmen last year. I believe they were true freshmen last year, Sidney Stewart and Zahir Mathis. Zahir Mathis was a relatively highly ranked player. They had 41 and 31 pressures last year. Sidney Stewart had 12 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. Zahir Mathis had 12. They had 16 and 19 run stops last season. Very good players. They also bring back, I believe Nasir Taylor comes back as well from last season. Ian Thomas comes back from last year. Yes, Nasir Taylor does comes back. D.D. Holmes was a guy that transferred in. He was a solid player for them last year. There's some talent there, Trev. They also got in Levon Johnson out of the portal, Derek LeBlanc out of the portal, who was a relatively high-ranked player. And they got these 2 kids, these 2 twin brothers that transferred in, I believe, from Washington. Armand Parker, what was the other brother's name? Javon Parker, who are 6'3", 300-pound, just kind of good, stout depth players at D-tackle. Plus, they bring in Zion Ely, who was by some a 5-star top 5 national player last year. They're going to have one of the youngest but most explosive, talented edge groups in the country this year when you look at what they've got. So their 3 best pass rushers this year could be true 2 sophomores and a true freshman. But they're very good, very talented players. And they got to put it all together. They've got a lot to prove. But it's a group that I am very curious to see how they grow and if their defensive coordinator knows at all how to use this group, because there's a lot to like from a talent. And it's not just the PFF numbers. You watch them on film, you're like, these guys should be better. They should be better than what they are. And they just, they weren't able to put it together. But, man, I really like the talent that Maryland's assembling on their D-line. Now we just got to find out if they can coach it up.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of talent. That's why they're my sleeper team.
I like that pick. That is a sleeper.
Yes.
That is believe me, it didn't take a whole lot of analytical genius to be like a defensive line that returns a guy that had 64 total pressures last year as a sleeper. Maryland is a sleeper. That's a heck of a pull.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yep. What about the risers, Trev?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the teams that are in the top 10 that you think can make 3 or plus spot jumps.
The team that I'm paying attention to right now in my ranking is Clemson. I had them come in at number 10, and I projected them in at number 10 for all the reasons that I listed off. If this is the defensive line that Dabo Swinney needs to be successful and going into, if the benefit of playing in year 2 of the Tom Allen system is going to work for them, I could see them jumping up to number 7. I don't know if they're going to make the jump all the way up into the top 5. I just, compared to some of the other schools, I don't know if they have the top level talent in the depth to be able to compete with what Oregon brings back, what Texas potentially has, what Notre Dame potentially has. Obviously, Miami's in that conversation as well, in all seriousness. I don't know if they have that to be able to jump into the top 5. But I could see Clemson starting to push that conversation if my addition by subtraction theory of getting Peter Woods and TJ Parker off to the NFL draft is going to be a dividend, be a major dividend for them. So my riser is Clemson.
I have 2, LSU and Ohio State, my 9 and 10 teams. And it really comes down to one of the big issues with evaluating those 2 teams is what we talked about earlier. There's talent there, but there's a lot of ifs and what ifs and maybes and I'm not sure's with those units, way more than the teams ahead of them. But if they all hit or most of them hit, then they jump at least 3-4 spots. I think both LSU and Ohio State have a chance to jump into the top 5. I'd probably say Ohio State has a little bit more of an opportunity just because of there's the proven consistency of how good their D-lines have been. in recent years and Larry Johnson's track record. So if you were to say, hey, you're going to bet which one does make the rise, I'd probably go with Ohio State. There's even more question marks for me at LSU because it's also, do they have the coaching that can develop a top 5 D line? I know Ohio State does. They've done it many times over the years, and there was one constant. They had different head coaches, different D coordinators. What was the one constant in all those great D lines going back to beginning of Urban Meyer to now? What's the one constant? Larry Johnson. So and this isn't the first time Ohio State's lost a bunch of dudes in the NFL over a 2-year stretch, and they keep rolling. So that's why I look at Ohio State. There just was too much projection for me to bump them up. You know, Edric Houston dealing with injuries. I'm not high on James Smith. John Walker's a nice player, but how good is he really? Can Bo Atkinson really be the guy he was in the Big? Can he be the guy in the Big Ten that he was in the ACC? Is Zion Grady ready to be that guy? Can Kari Wilder help as a freshman? Like, there's a lot of those question marks. There's really only one proven player at this level, and that's Kenyatta Jackson. And they lost a lot from last year. High draft picks, or some high draft picks. Another guy that wasn't highly drafted but was a dominant college player in Caden Curry. But if those things hit and Larry Johnson keeps doing what Larry Johnson does, I could see Ohio State jumping up really high, like into the top 5. I could. Same with LSU, but I'm less certain of LSU.
Sure.
They're a bit more of a, I'm not sure if I'm ready to go there yet. I think what LSU could maybe do, however, is jump up to like 7-6, which is like slightly outside of the true riser category. So if I was going to bet between the two, I'd take Ohio State, but it also wouldn't shock me if LSU jumps more than 3 spots either. They just would need a lot more to go right. And they're also counting on more freshmen than Ohio State is.
That's fair. I'm with you on where you're at with LSU. Let's talk about the team in our top 10, Brian, that's the most likely to drop out. And for me, that team's Georgia Bulldogs.
Okay. Okay. Let's do it.
Where I get nervous with Georgia, and here's where I'm at with them. On one hand, when we talked about why I had them ranked in my top 10 was because they have the ability to come at you in waves. They might not have that solidified dude, but they have the ability to just throw waves of really good football players at you. That also means that they need more players across the board to live up and play to their potential in my eyes. And so what if they can't come at you in waves? What if they're just because their lack of production is just I'm projecting that a lot of these players take the jump. And unlike some players on their offensive line, it's not like they were crazy young last year. Like Georgia's offensive line had a couple of true freshmen starting on it. And, Georgia's defensive line, like they have Gabe Harris is about to be a senior. Jordan Hall is a redshirt junior. Quintavious Johnson is a junior. In the depths, Xavier McLeod is a redshirt junior who transferred in this past season. Yeah. Josh Horton is a redshirt junior who transferred. So that's some of my concern with Georgia.
And they're not recruiting like they used to, where it's like they've got these 3-4 freshmen that might be able to come in and dominate as freshmen. They're not recruiting there.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the one for me that makes me a little nervous about Georgia. That's where I get a little nervous with them.
I view Georgia as like they are what they are. I have them ranked where I have them ranked. What did I have them? 8th? And you had them 7 or vice versa?
I think I had them 7.
You had them 7, I had them 8. I don't know how much they're going to fall, how much they're going to rise. I just kind of think they are what they are. But if I'm wrong on them, Trev, I would lean towards being with you that they fall. And it could be because and they could be everything you and I think they're going to be and still fall because of teams like USC, Ohio State, LSU, Maryland, Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, whoever that could just be better than them because they are what they are. They're not going to rise, but if they fall, it's not even them falling may not even be that the legitimate questions you brought up end up being a problem. If they are exactly what you and I think they're going to be this year, they could still fall because they're the second of 2 defensive lines that you and I talked about that like they just are what they are.
Yep.
The other one just happens to be a lot better, and that's Oregon.
Right.
So that I'm with you on that. My dropout team is Texas Tech, and it's simple. If I'm wrong on my evaluation of their transfers, they're not as good, they fall out. It really is that. If I'm overestimating how good Adam Trick and Trey White and Mateen. And I'm not super high on the kid from Wake Forest. He's a good player, but I don't think he is what some people thought he was. But they don't need him to be that. He's going there to be their fourth best defensive tackle, maybe. And it's not even a given he's going to start for them. You know what I mean? Like, but if I'm wrong on those transfers and my evaluation of Adam Trick is wrong and he can't make that MAC to Big 12 jump, then they'll fall out. It's simple. That one's pretty simple.
Yeah, that was the side that I aired on, that why I didn't rank Texas Tech. That was one of the teams that we had in difference. You're asking a good amount of the players that you brought in to make the jump from G5 to P4. That always makes me nervous, especially when your entire projected defensive line is all portal guys. That's what makes me nervous about SMU's, but I'm with you there. What about teams that fall in our rankings but stay within the top 10?
So kind of like drop at least 3 spots. I have 3. I have 3 top 5 teams that I'm looking at. And it's number 1 is Texas. And it's for what we talked about earlier. If there's a lot of questions at D tackle and who's opposite of Colin Simmons, if it's another year of all you got to do is slow down number 1 and you win that battle, then they're going to fall. Now, they're not going to be outside the top 10 necessarily, but I could see Ohio State and Texas flipping. You know what I mean? And when we get into the season. So that's why I have them. They're one of mine. Ole Miss is the other one. And it really goes back to, you kind of said why they were one of my potential falls way back. We talked about them. You said, if Princewell was really the key to all of it, if he was really the glue and it was having to defend him, and kind of allowed everybody else to be in more favorable matchups, and maybe they're not ready to be like that dude right now, then that could cause Ole Miss to fall. I think the other thing about Ole Miss falling is also they could be what you and I think they are. I think they're at their ceiling as well. And them falling could be they're what we think they are, but Ohio State, LSU, Texas Tech, Indiana, Clemson, those teams, Oklahoma, those teams just have big jumps and go ahead of them. Because sometimes falling isn't you do anything wrong. It's just that guy's better. You're the same guy you were last year, but this guy just passed you up. And that's where I think Ole Miss. And here's the third. Notre Dame.
They were one of my 2.
You have to talk about Notre Dame because right now we have Notre Dame number 2 based on the proven production that they have returning, the depth that they have. But it's also based on Bryce Young making a jump, Keon making a jump. It's based on Tion Gray becoming more than just a rotation player and being a guy, an impact. It's Jason Onye playing a full complete season, something he's never done. It's based on a freshman stud DN stepping in and it's being part of the rotation. And there's still some question marks with Notre Dame where project them to be outstanding, but there's a lot of projection in 2 to 5. Except I'd say Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the 1, 2 to 5 that I don't think there's much projection. Notre Dame requires more projection than Texas or Ole Miss or even Miami to a degree. Not Miami because there's a lot of Miami's got a lot of one-trick ponies that need to prove they can be two-way players. There's projection with Miami as well. They're a team you could talk about potentially being a faller, but with how they've played on the D line the last couple of years, I think there's a little bit of some certainty there where I don't know that they're going to fall more than 3 spots. But with Notre Dame, if the things that we talked about don't pan out, it could be a problem. And then the other thing, Trev, if we're being honest as Notre Dame fans, this is a team whose D-line has not been able to stay healthy the last 2 years.
My 2, one of them was Notre Dame, and it's for a lot of the reasons that you listed off. Maybe it's just because I still have PTSD from what happened in 2024 and a little bit in 2025, but they haven't shown the ability to get healthy. And every single player across the board with Notre Dame on the D-line, in my eyes, is nobody that I'm asking to just be who you were last year. Boubacar has to take a jump in my eyes. Bryce Young has to take a jump. Keon Keeley, Jason Onye, Elijah Hughes, Tion Gray. I guess Francis Brew is the one guy that's like, if you're just the all ACC honorable mention caliber player that you were last year,
Notre Dame's defense is going to be Elijah Hughes is the other one.
Yep.
I just need him to do what he needs to do.
Yeah. Armel Mookum has to take a jump.
I would say Bryce. I'd say Boubacar can be the guy he was last year, but that requires
Bryce to
Bryce to have a big jump, Keon, and now Francis has to kind of, maybe get so. So the point is, Trev, a guy or two could be who they were last year, but it's going to require a lot of other dudes to improve. It's more about just the steady improvement I expect from everyone across the board.
Here's the other. Yeah, absolutely. Here's the other piece with me with Notre Dame. System was also the thing that we evaluated as well. I need to see Chris Ash let this defense loose against the top teams that Notre Dame plays this year because he didn't do it last year.
They were very aggressive against a lot of teams, but then against USC, against Miami, and to a degree against Texas A&M, he pulled them back. And yeah, that's a very good observation. Agree with that.
That was the other reason. My other team that I could see falling is Indiana. I love what they're like up the middle. I have questions about their depth. One of Mario Landino or Tyreek Tucker gets hurt. I don't know what your answer is on the interior. Josh Burnham. We spent a lot of time talking about it sucks that he's leaving Notre Dame. This is what his pressure rate is. If you give him X amount of snaps, he also has to show that he can stay healthy for the duration of a full season too.
And be as impactful on an expanded basis.
Yes, absolutely. So that's some of my concerns.
Because you're correct. Josh has missed games each of the last 2 years. That's right. Not a bunch, but he's missed games. And it's a good point.
And when your depth at Indiana doesn't look like the depth at what you have in South Bend, it's like you need to be more available. Like that's, I think it was Christopher Galloway in the chat one time said, like, one of the best abilities is availability. And when you're a team like Indiana who continuously rebuilds through the transfer portal, you're not able to go and get 5 defensive ends in the transfer portal to supplement your depth needs. And so that's where,
But they needed, potentially 4 or 5. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's where I'm at with Indiana. They are a couple of injuries away from being a very different looking defensive line. And that's just the nature of how they've had to build their program recently. Luckily, they haven't suffered that many injury problems in the trenches.
That's what kept them out of the top 5 for me.
Sure.
Was the depth. That was a concern for me.
Absolutely.
Because as I said, I think their D-line could end up being better than it was last year. It's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Pretty darn good. But can it be can it
sustain any sort of loss? Yeah. Like that's I'm with you. That's my fear with them.
And they didn't have to deal with that last year.
Oh.
There were times when Mikael Kamara wasn't necessarily looking quite like the guy he was last year, but he was still good. And you got to show me that you can go out there and be more productive. And especially in the pass rush, because the one thing about Indiana's D-line last year, they were a great run-stuffing D-line. Great run-stuffing D-line. They've got to do a better job of getting pressure in some of the bigger moments as well. I think that's something that I want to see from that D-line. The good news for them is they went and got a guy that I think can do that because Josh Burnham has been very good in the postseason.
Yep. Absolutely.
In his tenure at Notre Dame. Yeah, very good. And go ahead. I'll say they were good against Alabama and Oregon getting pressure on the quarterback, but those teams didn't have very good offensive lines. Miami stoned them pretty well and from a pass rush standpoint. I think they were, I have to look it up. Give me a minute to look it up, but I don't think that they even got into double digits in pressures against Miami. So just give me a second to look that up. Let me see here real quick. Trev, they had 7 pressures last year against Miami. 3 hits plus sacks in the quarterback. That's it. Now they did have 16 run stuffs, which again is why I think that team that's the bread and butter of their D-line. Is being able to shut down the run. But that's partly why I think this D-line could be better, because I do think they have better edge rushers, meaning guys that can step up in those big games. I think Mikael Kamara went undrafted, and I think Stephen Daly was a 6th-round draft pick. So, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be the thing. And I don't think he played in the championship game. Wasn't he hurt?
Yeah, I think he tore his Achilles or his ACL celebrating the Big Ten championship or something.
Yeah, I think you're right, Trev. I think he got, because that's the other thing you got to think about when the pressures, and he had 6 pressures in the Big Ten championship game. So not having Stephen Daly hurt them a little bit.
Yeah.
But, he only had 2 pressures against Oregon in the regular season. He ripped up Ohio State pretty good. He ripped them up pretty good. He had no pressures against Iowa. I mean, so, again, this is that consistency, but he was a good player, but he actually went undrafted as well. Neither one of them got drafted.
Yeah.
The guys they have in now are more NFL athletes than the guys they had last year. Now the question is, are they better football players? It's a fair question. And that could cause them to fall. I like that one. I don't think it's going to happen because I think Pat Kuntz has shown that he can get the most out of guys. But to your point, they need to show it. It's a good one. My next 3, just as we wrap this up, Trev, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Alabama were kind of my next 3 that I looked at as jumping in. Alabama's an interesting team because I couldn't put them in. But if you actually look at the talent they have on the D-line, it's still pretty good. I just don't have a lot of faith in them to get anything out of that group. Because I count Pierre as a lineman. I count him as an edge. There's talent there, and they lost some guys in the portal, but they got a lot of guys still coming back, and they've got some young talent. I just can't put them in. But if they finally figure it out and say, hey, let's actually be sound and coach these kids up and, use our talent on defense, they could jump in there. But Oklahoma's another one. They're counting on a lot of talented – Phil Steele has them way too high. He has them top 5. David Stone's a really good player. Taylor Ween's a really good player, but there's a lot of question marks after that.
Agreed.
That I need to see step up. But if those guys step up the way that they're capable of, they could jump into the top 10. Clemson was my first one, so you and I see Clemson very similarly. They're another one that I see as one that could potentially jump in as well.
Yeah, my jump-in team was Oklahoma. I thought about Alabama because of the talent, and then I just went back to – I honestly think –
You remember who their coach was?
Yeah, Kane Womack and Freddie Roach specifically is, I think, just driving the talent into the defensive front into the ground. They did it with Keon Keeley. They did it with Quay Russaw. They did it with Tim Smith. That's my concern with them. You can have a lot of 5-star talent, but if you're just not teaching them the fundamental principles of how to play the defensive line at the collegiate level, I just don't know what to tell you. Oklahoma was that one for me. They're a team that if they're able to put it together, and that's where they have the complete opposite problem of Alabama, and that I have a lot of trust in Brent Venables and their defensive coordinator and their D-line coach to get the most out of that defensive line. So Oklahoma's that team for me. Next to jump in.
I'm with it. Good stuff, Trev. Real good breakdown. I enjoyed that.
That was fun. We did have a super chat before we get out of here today.
We did. One popped up. Excellent. All right, here we go.
Sir.
From Jari Z. Bear.
Appreciate the super chat. Miami's going 16-0 with 4 Heismans and an upsetting Brady Mahomes in the Daytona Super Series 500. That's all you had to say, Brian.
Yeah, seriously. No, Miami won't go. They won't go 16-0. They're going to go 17-0. They're going to go 13-0 in the regular season. They're going to get disrespected by the committee because everybody hates Miami apparently, and then they're going to have to get a first-round game. They're going to win by 95, and then their revenge tour. They're just going to beat the next 4 teams by 40, and then we're going to say, hey, they could beat 0-1 Miami. Is that good? Is that fair? Does that work? Because that's pretty much what I've been told in the chat.
Heard that.
November 7th can't come soon enough, bro.
Dude, yeah. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I believe the guys are going live on IB Nation Sports Beat tonight, 5:05 p.m. They're also talking about the comments from Marcus Freeman. They're also having a Notre Dame mailbag. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at noon, like we talked about, scheduling change for this week as we're putting the finishing touches on the magazine. So,
my bad. My guy Daily Comments wanted to remind me that he was good. He wasn't involved in that. He was chill during that segment. So, yes, you are correct. He actually said we had a good ranking. So, one of the 3 Miami fans acted like a reasonable person. Again, you can disagree with what our ranking is, but be reasonable in your responses. That was my frustration. So Daily Comments, you do get credit. Thank you, sir. My apologies.
Yeah, we'll see where you're at the week of November 7th, Daily. But no, in all seriousness, you are appreciated, sir. All right.
So is Spencer and Albert. We do appreciate those guys. It's just there just comes those times when we start talking about Miami where they just lose all objectivity, in my opinion. That's my frustration. And then say, argue about something we never said.
Folks, on your way out of this show, please be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.
Have a great day, everybody, even the Miami fans. Be good.
I guess then.